And so to 1999, as I said at the beginning, the weather here is absolutely beautiful. It will hold no fears for the riders, but the cobbles will, as always. The Paris-Roubaix, which started in the 19th century, has now survived the 20th century, and next year, you bet, will come out fighting in the 21st century. All of the big names of cycling are here, those men who specialise in the one-day classics. No, Marco Pantani isn't here, but his team certainly is. Andre Schmil is here. Johan Museeuw has a date with the cobbles, and also a little bit of revenge on his mind. He's back to fight yet again. But before we go to the action, let's now go to Paul Sherwin. He's talking to some of the riders.
Peter, a special day for you today, Paris-Roubaix, and you're the leader of the World Cup. It must be quite a proud moment.
Yeah, it's always good. When you have a new jersey, it's always something special.
But it makes it more difficult because everybody can see you in this jersey. You're going to be much more of a marked man.
Yeah, but last week was also one of the big favorites, and because I won Roubaix and the Pan, and for me I can live with that. And when you are in good condition, then yeah, it's no problem. When you are in bad condition, then it's not so easy.
This week, did you go to look at the cobblestones in the Forest of Arenberg? It's a little different this year.
We did it after Gent-Wevelgem, and we did Bos van Valers and in the other direction, and for me it's the same. I think now it's difficult. I think you crash when your speed is really slowly, and then you're going to crash. And now it's uphill, and I think it will be a gear.
It's going to be a great race. It always is at Paris-Roubaix, and you'll be looking for the win again.
I'm going to try.
Joe, we've got a big smile on the face this morning. Paris-Roubaix. Why are you smiling? It's a crazy race.
It's a crazy race. More the weather is good, and it's not the pavé is also good. And I think it's a good race. It's the last big race that I'm riding this fourth season, and I have the morale for riding good.
What did Uncle Eddie say? Because I know he told you off for falling off last week in the Tour of Flanders, and he maybe gave you a few tips on how to ride these cobblestones.
Yeah, he gave me tips. More, it's always me the riding on the bike. He can say everything. Is the legs not good? It's all the tips or nothing, and you need just good legs today and good head, and all the rest is just nothing.
It's a great race, though. It's a race where you have to have the morale to ride. You have to want to ride Paris-Roubaix because it is a little bit crazy.
Yeah, it's a little bit crazy. It's crazy. Well, now it's good. It's sun. Or if it's raining, it's the baddest race you have in the whole season. But it's 50 kilometers. 50 kilometers. Yeah, and it's the craziest race from the year.
And the teammates are a bit crazy too.
Yeah. Also, always the same.
Okay, good luck.
Thanks.
Yeah, water.
Georgie, talking to a lot of the guys this morning, they really think you got a great chance on a Paris-Roubaix like this.
Yeah, I mean, just need a lot of luck for today. I feel good. I feel like I've been getting stronger every race that I do, and I'm nervous, but at the same time excited, and hopefully I'll have a good day.
It's good to see that your old sponsor, Fred Mangoni's, made the trip over from New York to watch you race on the cobbles.
Yeah, that definitely adds a little pressure, having Fred here and also my father. They both made a big trip from New York to come watch me, so I'm hoping I can do them proud today.
It's also important to ride Paris-Roubaix a number of times so that you really know how the cobbles are going to come up, and you've been right up there over the last few years.
Yeah, it's definitely important. This is a race, so every year you learn something new, and this will be my 6th year doing it. I'm hoping I could have one of my best years.
So we saw you training over the cobblestones the other day through the forest of Arenberg. They've changed the direction. Do you think that will have an impact on the race?
I think it will, just because it'll be a little bit safer going into the Arenberg, and the last part of the Arenberg now is a little bit uphill, so it's going to make that section harder. But it's still 100 kilometers to go after the Arenberg, so it's not. I don't think it's going to be a critical change, but it's going to make the race a bit harder.
And George, you're looking to take the U.S. National Champions jersey onto the stadium in Roubaix?
I definitely would like to do that, yes. Thank you.
Well, Max, we talked to you last week at the start of Tour of Flanders, and you said you were looking for a good performance. You were always in with the action, so obviously the form is starting to come.
Yeah, the form is there. Probably the luck has to be around me, Today it's going to be a special day, I mean, there's not much to say. It's just going to be you and the cobbles finally at the end. But for sure, I'm gonna try and race in a different way than the Tour of Flanders. I'm gonna try and not be in the race till the last, not like Flanders. I was almost in every one, and then when the final one went, I wasn't there, So
Paris-Roubaix is a special race, though, Max, isn't it? If you really want to be up there at the end, you have to have super motivation for this race.
I have super motivation. I'm really confident. The only thing, I don't know the course so well. I mean, I don't know all the sections of pavé. I know the Arenberg and another couple ones, the most important ones. But you need a lot of luck, a lot of luck, especially in this race, for punctures and crashes and stuff like that.
And the one bad thing I think about your team is that you very often find yourself alone, especially at the end of a race like this.
Yeah, and that's been a bit of my problem through the years, I'd say. I mean, not saying that all the teams I was in there were bad teams, but. I mean, to have a good team in Paris-Roubaix, you need special riders. What can be there after 230 kilometers, I'd say. From 230 on, and there's not many riders what can be there. So we'll see.
But you're up for today.
Yeah, 100%.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Well, Andre Smil won this race in 1994, and Paul Sherwin said to him he's already won a World Cup event this year. Is he more relaxed now for Paris-Roubaix?
Vous êtes un peu plus décontracté?
That depends. It depends which way you look at it. I'm a bit more relaxed because I've already won Milan-San Remo, but it's still Paris-Roubaix, and it is one of my major objectives. It's one of the races most important to me. It's a race where you have to have a special motivation. It's a difficult race, and you've got to have a lot of courage. It's definitely not a race like the others. Paris-Roubaix, you have to have everything, all the things, right on the day. They've changed the forest of Arenberg a little bit this year. Will that change the rest of the race? I don't think so. I don't think it'll change the important things. But it's very good for the riders, and it makes it was a lot more difficult. It was dangerous, and this year it won't be so dangerous. Everybody knows that the forest of Arenberg is an important section of cobblestones, but not like before. Will it be an advantage to have several teammates with you towards the end, like Joe Plancard? Oh, oui. Yes, of course. It's a big and important factor to have a teammate with you. Then you can be more tactical.
I can never understand how riders can get super motivated for a race like Paris-Roubaix, because it's just like madness.
Oh, it's our life, isn't it? Madness. We're half mad anyway, us blokes. So no, it's just a big adventure, I think. And if you like Pavé anyway, and you like the racing up in Belgium, then this is even better because it hasn't got any hills in it.
But it is a special race, and you really have to have super motivation to come here and be competitive.
Yeah, I mean, you only need to lack a little bit of enthusiasm for this race, and you can pretty easily find yourself down the back and involved with all the crashes. So, yeah, it's so important to start at the front, and we've got a strong team, a lot of confidence and a bit of enthusiasm with all the youngsters in the team, so we'll see how we go.
You'd be pretty psyched to come into the stadium and looking for the win.
Velodrome racing's always been a favourite part of mine. It's just you got to go 280k to get to the prick.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Well, Andrea Taffy is a man who has a real feeling for Paris-Roubaix. Here's Paul with him.
Andrea, today is a
big day for you. You've been dreaming about Paris-Roubaix for a long time. For a long time I've thought about this race. I'm very motivated, and I hope that I can do something special in this race, Paris-Roubaix. Today it's probably easier than it has been in previous years because there's no rain. Well, last year there was no rain, but every year this race it's difficult. There are lots of different factors. You need some luck. But luck is probably the most important factor.
So Andrea Taffy takes his place in the big peloton of 183 now, the race over 266 kilometres, as it rolls gently away over cobblestones, of course, heading now for Roubaix, and it's lovely and sunny as we leave Compiègne. I'm sure too that Johan Museeuw, full of trepidation after his accident last year in the forest of Arenberg. The riders going into that forest in the opposite direction this year as a safety precaution, and all happy as they roll away. And they now face up to 52 kilometres of cobblestones on the route, slightly changed as well as we approach the stadium into Roubaix.
Johan Museeuw waited until Thursday of this week to make the decision as to whether or not he was going to ride this year's Paris-Roubaix. He wanted to just check out what the weather conditions were going to be like. All of Belgium feel that this man, Frank van den Broeke, has a great chance, although his team weren't too happy and they didn't really want him to ride, feeling he should pass Paris-Roubaix and wait until next week's Liège-Bastogne-Liège.
There's Andrea Taffy, who's had a second and a third in this classic, chatting with his team as they all roll gently towards the canal, and then the race is on. We're now joining the action as we head towards the forest of Arenberg.
And once again, you see, Phil, Team Mappé have launched a man into the early morning breakaway. L'échappée matinale, they call it in France. And in fact, Tom Steels, the Belgian champion, just like last year, has got into this group, which was 10 riders, but it's now gone down to 9 because one man has just been dropped because of a puncture. Team Lotto on the front of the main field, more than 3 minutes behind, are trying to place their man, André Schmiel, into an ideal position when they go into the forest on this new approach of Arenberg.
Well, as we head to the forest, the gap is 2 minutes and 50 seconds, and the man who's just punctured Paul mentioned was poor old Andy Flickinger from the Casino team. They had 2 riders. In fact, his teammate Kasputis was the man who started the breakaway. He's been joined by Tom Steels and a group of riders. Steels the only serious contender, in my opinion, in this league group, but it just shows you how Mapei treat this event, always looking for every move.
It's a race that they've really come to regard as their own. Another attack down the right-hand side here. This is the TVM squad. That was Johan Capio. He's trying to get the leader of the World Cup this morning, Peter van Petegem, there in 3rd position in the white jersey, right to the front as well, because although the approach to the Forest has changed an awful lot, everybody still regards the Foresters Arenberg as being the first real strategic part of the race. It's not where you're going to win the race, but if you're not careful, that's where you could lose it.
Well, all of the sectors of pavé, the cobblestones, broken up into zones today. They count down, zone number 1 being the final zone for the riders, as we head now towards the entrance to the forest. There's the champion of Belgium, Tom Steels, had a marvellous race, Ghent-Wevelgem, winning that for the 2nd time just a couple of days ago. And so too, of course, did George Hincapie of the United States. Hincapie back in the main field. Stefan de Jong coming through. The other man in the breakaways, his teammate Servais Canavan, and as I say, Kasputis was the man that started the move. Laurent Debian is here, the Cofidis rider. There's Kasputis going through now. Rolf Aldag, that's Jan Boven, the Rabobank rider.
Jan Boven, it's the first time I've ever seen Jan Boven riding at this level before. He's a first-year professional on the Rabobank squad, and he's proving to be a very good team member. But TVM have made also a very good tactical move here by getting 2 riders into this early morning breakaway, and they too will have force in numbers when we go into the latter part of this race. But Tom Steels is riding exceptionally well. In fact, last week the Mapei team left him out of the Tour of Flanders, and this is the corner into the forest, the new approach.
Zone 16 then. As we go into the forest now, the crowd all barriered back this year now. Gone those wonderful scenes, and we have to mourn them, I think, of the crowd being on the road with the riders. But last year, I think it got to its limit as riders started crashing all over the place. And Johan Museo going down, damaging that left knee, which at one stage was developing gangrene, almost causing the loss of his leg. And obviously we can't have that. So the crowd very orderly in the forest today. It's a lovely spring day. And already hanging off the back here, the man that started it all, Arturis Kasputis.
It almost seems and feels sterile here in the forest of Arenberg this year, because the crowd have been kept so far back from the road, and they are very, very orderly. Normally here were signs of absolute chaos, the whole road covered by spectators, and I think in fact a lot of spectators may have boycotted this area this year and gone to see the race in different parts.
Well, there's plenty down the other end, because remember when this was the end as they came out of the forest last year, this crowd was enormous here because the cars are locally, they jump in the cars and they go off to their next vantage point. So I'm hoping that when we get to the other end we will see equally a big crowd. But this is the breakaway, and the peloton timed, the last time check we got, it was 2:51. And 3, 6, 7 riders, 1 hanging off the back, so just 1 rider being dislodged at the moment in the forest.
This is a disgusting piece of cobblestones, 2.4 kilometres long, and the main field now already on the first kilometres of the forest of Arenberg. Now the last time check we had, Phil, was around about 3 minutes, and it's certainly coming down to 1.5 minutes now, because they've closed down dramatically over the last 10 kilometres, and in fact there's Flickinger that is being picked up there by the man on the front, Andrea Taffy. Taffy doing a lot of work here for the Mapei squad, trying to explode the main field, who were almost compact when they got to this section of cobblestones.
Well, although you're a long way from the finish here, 100 kilometres of racing still to go. In fact, you've got to get to the front to see the cobbles, and you've got to make sure you leave yourself some room to manoeuvre, and that's why I think Andrea Taffy is giving away a lot of energy here to hold first position. It's the safest place to be in. They've picked up 1 of the front 10 then, Flickinger back in this group and probably going to pass straight through it, as Andrea Taffy, you're quite right, is trying to break the field here and get something moving.
This is the best option on this section of cobblestones here, as the leaders go through the drier part in the middle. You can see the gaps already starting to appear, but here there are big gaps in the cobblestones as well, and if you can pick your way through, it's much easier and much safer. And what Andrea Taffy is hoping, that if there are any crashes, they're going to be behind him, and he is now taking the advantage of riding in first position. But you've got to be a strong man to keep the power on at the front of a field like this. His teammate is there in second position, Wilfred Peters. the big lieutenant of Johan Museo, the man who is always at the front of these races when Team Mappé needs a strong man to do some work.
Well, he's rattling his way towards the end. It is a long way. In fact, Paul and I and a number of guys with us rode through the forest only yesterday and enjoyed the ride through, but there was no pressure on us as we went down to the end. We had in fact had a chat with the Lamprey team who were taking a good close look at the cobblestones. Now back up to the race here, and there's still plenty of room for action here. The crowd is getting bigger, Paul, which is a good sign, and we are in fact nearing the end of the forest.
A great crowd. Everybody loves to come here. The big signs out of the Flandrian Lion, and they will all be for Johan Museo after that great comeback that he really showed last week, and in the Tour of Flanders he was back on the crest of the wave, finishing third in that race. Now it's Tom Steels on the front with the two TVM riders putting the pressure on. There's a slight gap to the next man behind, which is Jan Boven, and a little bit further back is Laurent Debian in the red and white strip of Cofidis. Laurent Debian is from the north of France. In fact, he was born in Roubaix, so he has a dear affection for this race and would certainly like to be able to stay in this front group a little while longer.
Well, the crowd has certainly found the voices down here. You know, this is the first time for years the riders have been forced to ride all of the way through the forest on the cobblestones, because quite often once they get onto the tracks with no barriers, they nip off and force the crowd onto the cobbles as they seek the grass verges. Well, the camera stops shaking, so do the legs of the riders as they come off, and it's Tom Steels driving here with the two TVM boys with him, Servaes Canavan and Stefan de Jong. But you know, the work of Andrea Taffy, and Andrea Taffy on his own has slashed that lead dramatically.
He's been on the front now for almost 2 kilometres. This is a very long section of cobblestones. There's a crash at the back, yeah. One of the riders from Cantina Tollo has gone down there. That looks very much like Marco Antonio Di Renzo.
And it's all, is this Murray who's down here as well? Well, they're a bit of a shump, but they look okay. And if that's the only two fallers of the race coming through the forest, they've got away with it pretty well. Eric Zabel passing through below our picture there as well now, as the leaders are all coming off the forest over the little level crossing. Always a risk, those crossing gates are down. They don't stop the trains as well as the cars, you know. Out of zone 16.
George Hincapie very close to the front. They were led out of the forest there by Joe Plancart, but I have to say Hincapie looking in pretty good form to ride so close to the front. This is a race that Hincapie feels he's got a very good chance in, and speaking to Frankie Andrea this morning before the start, Frankie too felt that the hopes of US Postal Service would be on the shoulders of George Hincapie today after a great 4th place in Gateway game just a couple of days ago.
Big Eros Poli, former Olympic team time trial champion, stamping his authority at the front of that little fragmenting group. The Italian flag flying. There's plenty of Italians riding this race.
You see the chaos at the back of the field here. The important thing about riding over the cobblestones is to ride with power, to ride in a big gear, and once you lose that power it feels as if you bounce over every individual cobblestone, and it really does hamper your progress, which is why the big guys are always on the front when it comes to the cobblestone sections, riding along in a gear. On this cobblestone section they will start off using the 53 by 14, and towards the end, because of this slight incline up to the exit of the cobblestones, will drop down to a 15 sprocket.
Now once off the cobbles coming in this direction, they'll make their way on a right-handed course to return to the original route. Then they'll turn left onto the next section of pave, where in the old days they would have turned right because they came from the opposite direction. Then they will resume the route as the riders come now away from the forest of Orenburg, past the pits which abound in this area, and they're absolutely flying. You can see them in the centre of the picture there, rushing through the cars.
Absolute chaos, a big split in the main field now, all of that caused by the work of just one man. That was Andrea Taffy wearing today the jersey of the champion of Italy. There are 4 men at the front now, and the next cobblestone section they will face is the cobblestones at Wallers. Itself a very tricky section of cobblestones, split into 2 with a railway bridge right in the middle. The 2 TVM riders riding excellently here, and these guys now I feel certain must realise that the advanced party of the main field will shortly be boring down upon them. Wilfred Peters there getting onto the back of this front split. There is Joe Plancart. There wearing number 81 is Frank van den Broeke, so he's done a good move to get into this group as well. And the rider there on the front from Lamprey is Pianagonda.
So this is the composition of a group trying to get itself organised. Pianagonda asking what's going on behind as we move on to the next section of cobbles at Wallers. And these are the four leaders, Jan Boven and Tom Steels, and the two boys from TVM, De Jonge and Canavan. And this is becoming to look quite a race now, because Tom Steels, we wouldn't have expected to be in that early move. He was part of the party which brought back a Casputus to form that spearhead group, and all that came together at around only 30 kilometres into the race today. So they've already been out front for an awful long way, Paul, well over 150 kilometres.
But this is a good composition for men like Peter van Petegem, the winner of last week's Tour of Flanders, because if he does come into one of these groups that comes across, he's going to have two teammates with him. And in this section of Paris-Roubaix, it's important to have somebody around you if you have a mechanical incident, to have some help. This is a long section of cobblestones, a bit of respite in the middle because they have put down a small amount of tarmac, but that doesn't last very long because they flick back onto the cobblestones again and they head out here towards the railway bridge. Now if you have a quick look up to the railway bridge there, they've actually nicknamed this the Pont Gibus, the Gibus Bridge, which is actually dedicated to Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle. That was his nickname, Gibus, after Gilbert. And in fact himself winner of Paris-Roubaix on two separate occasions.
And what great victories there were too, coming so very late in what was a long career for Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle. I once remember him cheering himself on watching a playback of a stage when he won Paris-Nice back at the start of the 80s, and he came and sat by me in the press room when they played back the time trial up the Col d'Ez and cheered for himself, which I thought was pretty good. He was going, "Allez Gilbert, allez!"
That was an incredible Paris-Nice back in 1980, and it snowed on nearly every day. After that, Stephen Roach got a victory in Paris-Nice, and then it was the long reign of Sean Kelly. But this is a pretty serious group happening here, Phil. It looked like there are 14 riders in that group. George Hincapie very comfortably in there. There's a rider in there from Crédit Agricole as well. But some of the big names are actually missing from this split off the front. There's Ballerini missing, André Schmiel is missing, and of course Johan Museo.
Well, they're just going under the Pont Gibus right now, so it's not very far then to that group. And here they are, the Belgian flag flying on French soil. And this group of some, 14 riders? No, the chasers rather of 14 riders. We've got four leaders here. I wonder how long that they will try to hold them off. I think they'll just get on with the race, and if it'll be a case of catch us if you can, because in a race like Paris-Roubaix, you never know quite literally what is around the corner. It could be a crash or a couple of flat tyres.
Rolf Aldag for Team Telecom on the front there, in front of Van den Broek. He was in the original early morning break of 10 riders. He's now been picked up by the front split of this group. Van den Broek, I have to say, Phil, riding a very good Paris-Roubaix so far. After all, I don't regard him really as a rider for this classic. I think he's much better in a race like the Flèche Wallonne or Liège-Bastogne-Liège. And a lot of discussions late into the night this week at the Cofidis headquarters, because the team management really didn't want him to ride. And I think he's going to go and ride with a vengeance today to prove to them, look, I wanted to ride this race. I knew what my responsibilities were, and I'm capable of riding Paris-Roubaix. And he's doing pretty well just now.
And sixth wheel in that long line is George Hincapie. He's just gone out to our picture to our right there. So the champion of the US has got himself into this rather lively looking group here. This is Wilfred Peters, who was placed last year in this event and looking now to be a challenger again. Leon Van Bon, and behind the two of them is Eric Zabel. So there are some big names in this group, Paul.
They certainly are. Eric Zabel, a great rider, as in the multi-stage races like the Tour de France, where he can go out there and beat the best in the world at sprints. But let's not forget, he comes from a former East German background, and he's a very tough bike rider. He grew up with Jan Ullrich. They're very long-term friends. And I have to say, last week he rode an excellent Tour of Flanders, and if it hadn't been for that crash on the slopes of the Mur de Grammont, we may well have seen Eric Zabel a lot closer to the front of the pack.
We saw the grimace there on the face of Tristan Hoffmann, another rider who is really having a great season. In fact, the TVM boys have changed the colours and in many ways have changed their attitude, because they're very positive this year, all of them. Aldag, the faithful lieutenant, usually of Jan Ullrich, to look after him, and of course Zabel is the good lead-out man for Eric Zabel, but he also is riding well this year in his own right. A lot of riders have found good form.
The Crédit Agricole rider in there is Frank Pancoli, another rider, survivor of the early group of 10. Taffy looking across there to Zabel. Okay, guys, we've got a good group going here. Everybody work together, and then we can build up our advantage on the riders behind. The thing about riding for a team like Mapei is every rider on the team has got a chance of winning a race like Paris-Roubaix at the start. And once Taffy can get himself into a situation making him number one on the road, he's trying to build on it.
Aldag through and off, so they've got the line going. George is going through as well. So these riders now beginning to slip into a nice little style. There's Pianagonda. He was in the original escape as well, so he's hung on well with the chase group. Wise decision, I suppose, in many ways, to float back to the group chasing you and then go back forward with that group. He won't use quite so much energy up.
His plan now is to try and place Franco Ballerini back with the leaders at the moment. Johan Museo there sitting in third position in the light white jersey of the Mapei squad, and obviously a lot of riders from Lotto here trying to help the man in second position there, Andre Schmiel. Schmiel always a very consistent performer when it comes here to Paris-Roubaix, and another Mapei rider moving up there that looks like Daniel Nardello. So the Mapeis at the moment playing a pretty good tactical game. They've got up the road, they've got Andrea Taffy, they've got Wilfred Peters, and right at the front of affairs they've got Tom Steele. So they'll be sitting back on that group and forcing riders like Schmiel and Ballerini to use up their teammates.
Talking to teammates, the two TVM boys here served their apprenticeship on the same Dutch team as well, when they rode a lot for Holland in the amateur races, although they're all called elite races now, and they've joined the same team. Knaven was the first to turn pro, and the first race he won as a pro, by the way, was the Dutch National Road Race, Dutch Professional Road Race Championship. And so De Jong has joined him now, and between the two of them, they're looking pretty solid. They're not showing any signs of tiredness at all here.
Any bike rider that comes to ride Paris-Roubaix has to come with a complete motivation and desire to ride this race. If you don't have that desire, it's not even worth lining your bike up on the start line, because this is a tough race. This is a race from a different era. You have to have courage. You have to keep fighting back from incidents, because everybody has some bit of bad luck during the course of a day like Paris-Roubaix. And if you give up and you lay down arms, you don't come back into the race.
And Paul Schoen should know, because he finished third in the amateur Paris-Roubaix, which is a mini version of the big pro event. Leaving now the town of Onang, and this is the chase group. Still not quite sure about the progress of those four leaders. They're hovering, but these guys are trying to reach them, but they're in no hurry at the moment, I don't think.
On the back, Frank Pancoli wondering how long he's going to survive now, because as we get closer to the finish, these sections of cobblestones will be taken faster and faster by the big guns at the front. He's only hoping that he can survive in this group. A chance here just to see how difficult the cobblestones are. You can even see the wheels of Servais Knaven here bouncing off the road. And an interesting point, in fact, those bikes have actually been made specially just for today's race. The rear triangle of the machine is actually designed just the same way as a cyclo-cross bike, and that was a gamble just in case the weather was bad and the roads were very muddy.
And it's proved probably a little bit unnecessary, but there are straight forks to absorb all the shocks as well, and a lot of clearance between the forks and the frame for the mud, which isn't here at the minute. And strong tyres too, much heavier than normal tyres. Hopefully they'll avoid the punctures.
Some teams also taking the precaution of actually injecting the tyres with a kind of gunk, that if you do get a small puncture, a slow puncture caused by these impacts, that in fact it seals it up and they can survive just a little bit longer and wait to have that wheel changed by a team mechanic.
A nice little close-up from the cameraman there, who's got his camera right on the ground level of the cobbles. There's still a big peloton here as they each scrabble to the right and left. Holding their position is the object of the game until you clear the cobbles, and then you try and scurry to the front and make a few places before you jump onto the next cobbles. Still around about that 50 seconds, the gap at the moment between the Taffy group, we'll call it the Taffy group, and the Wilfred Peters group, chasing down the four leaders.
Riding very comfortably in second position there, Johan Museo, right on the edge of the cobblestones, but you see, not quite as confident as he has been in previous years, lying off the back of the rider in front of him and leaning his head over to the right-hand side. He's looking further up the road to make sure that there's no danger there, there's not a parked car or a spectator that he might ride into. But Museo, certainly after that performance last week, filling Liège-Bastogne-Liège, I would say, right at the back of the top of international cycling.
It all sounds like common sense to me, as he keeps an eye on things. The race continues at the front. The Lotto boys trying to bring their man back into the action if he can. Koen Beckman pulling, in fact, Peters away from the group at the moment. This is quite a tough stretch of cobblestones, but there is that nice little shoulder which he's sticking to, but now he's being pushed out into the centre. Here comes the good road, sort of.
That section of cobbles there at Wandigny was 3.7 kilometres long, and now they get a bit of respite for about 7 kilometres before they head to the next long section, and that's going to be the section called Tilloy-les-Marchins, and that is quite long as well, 2.4 kilometres. But at the front of the race, these four guys, I felt certain were going to get pulled back there, but in fact Tom Steele's keeping a lot of pressure on. Taffy's now decided to try and get off the front of that group of chasers because they're not going fast enough for him.
Well, he's very anxious to close this race down for some reason or other, despite the fact his teammate is up front. The group we saw previously contains Ballerini, and that group is behind this group containing Taffy. So in effect the race split into three distinct important bunches.
Joe Plancart nailing back Andrea Taffy. Taffy obviously frustrated by the fact that there are a lot of hangers on in this group, a lot of guys not putting full weight into the success of this counter-attack, and he's encouraging all the time. You see the hand there encouraging the other riders to work, to get them in two long lines, sharing the pacemaking at the front. I think that is why he leapt off the front there, not to try and ride away to the finish, but to try and reduce the numbers in this group.
The white jersey of Eric Zabel, champion of Germany. Taffy not bothering to wait for anybody else. He's bringing the acceleration through. What, we've got 3-6, about 10 or 12 riders in this chase now. George Hincapie riding a clever race just now, watching the progress of it, knowing the front four are under control and just keeping an eye on to see how it's going to develop.
In fact, rather interesting the development at the moment, Phil, because the last time check we had from Race Radio, in fact, the Ballerini group was more than 1 minute and 40 seconds behind the leading group of four on the road. So Ballerini and his boys and Schmiel and Johan Museo quite a long way back at the moment. They're going to have to do something special to pull themselves back into the race. And what's surprising me more and more is how these four guys are surviving from that group of 12 behind.
Four working very well together. Three Dutchmen and a Belgian. All breathe in as we go across the many canals which abound in northern France. A little bit of picture breakup caused by that steel bridge with our cameras, but anyway, they're back together. And Jan Boven sitting at the back for the moment, but they are all working well together here, including the two TVM riders who've got their man Peter van Petegem in the third group on the road just now.
Tom Steels takes that corner quite precariously there. Strange position of Tom Steels, very upright. He's taking a lot of wind into his chest there, not the most streamlined position in the main field as he looks across at the cameraman to get some indication of what the advantage is, but he won't get too many stories from him.
Well, this race, a particularly long race, and you can see the riders are working well. They're just keeping the tempo nice. They're not trying to destroy each other. They know that they're unlikely to get to the finish as a foursome. Others will come up. That's what they will expect. So they're not giving everything at this stage of the event. Just enough to keep a nice tempo going, I think.
They just want to survive, and they know they will get picked up later on by some kind of counter-attack, and their job this morning when they went into that early morning breakaway was to survive as long as possible and then help the rest of the team when they came up. This is a tactic that happens in 9 out of every Paris-Roubaix. The early morning breakaway goes, they build up a maximum lead of 5 or 6 minutes, then once you get to the cobblestone sections, the main field speeds up behind and usually picks up the group before they get to the finish in Roubaix. Although that didn't work out one year because a young man by the name of Dirk de Mol got in the early breakaway and they never saw him again.
Absolutely. Finished with Thomas the Tank, Thomas Wegmuller, who might have won if he hadn't got a plastic bag stuck into his gears in sight of the flag. That's the way the race is. That's Paris-Roubaix, and we're back on the cobblestones again now. Steels has back position for the moment at least.
Zone number 12, 2.4 kilometres. A pretty reasonable section of cobblestones this. The cobbles all very dry today. When we went out and looked at them just yesterday, many of the cobblestone sections actually did seem rather muddy. I think many riders will be happy with the fact that it didn't rain overnight as it has done on previous occasions, and I'm looking today to see a pretty fast finish on the road into Roubaix.
Well, we're around about 90 kilometres from the finish now, with these four still dictating the race pattern. In a larger group, they've actually dictated this race pattern since the event began today, getting away on the smooth roads before they got to Troisville. Troisville is the town made infamous, of course, with its Rue de la Sucrerie, the sugar lane, and that's where the cobbles always begin.
just after 100 kilometres of racing. The first 100 kilometres of Paris-Roubaix is really just a preparation for the repetitive nature of the cobblestones that come afterwards. You see there a move across to the left-hand side from number 81, Vandenbroek, nearly taking out Taffy. Taffy doesn't like to ride too near to the back on these cobblestone sections, so he's moving himself further forward. Now this is the third group on the road, the group of Franco Ballerini. He's got two teammates in there on the front at the moment, trying to pull him back into the race. Now he won't be too happy about this because there's a lot of people not really helping. This is Johan Verstrepen on the front here. The Lampre team have in fact brought many riders across. There's been a drop in the front group of 4, Phil, because Boven has been left behind.
So Boven is not showing the real adaptation to the cobbles just now. The pace by these three have hurt him a little bit. If he can just hang on and hold them while they get over the cobblestones, he might well pedal back up on the smooth road. But at the moment, that's falling the way of the chasers, because if they pick up Boven, then they will start to get a little bit of encouragement from that.
If you lose the wheel on a long section of cobblestones like this, though, it's very difficult to come back, because once they get onto the tarmac road again, they will start to work. They'll share the pacemaking at the front, and if you've been shot off, I would say Jan Boven is going to lose 30 or 40 seconds on this section, because this is one of the longer sections at 2.4 kilometres, so it's very unlikely we'll see him again.
And look at Tom Steele setting the pace here continually. He was on such great form, but you know, at the end of the day, he was carried to the finish by two teammates, Wilfred Peters and Johan Museo, in the midweek Ghent-Wevelgem. He didn't do any work because he was the sprinter. They got him there, and he showed the clean pair of wheels to everyone. A race he's won now twice. He doesn't seem to be showing any tiredness whatsoever from that event, and here he is now right at the front doing a lot of work from an early kilometre.
Steele's not really thinking about victory for himself today. He's thinking about the team spirit, thinking about the team operations and the plans of the team. As we get a chance here, you can see the front wheel of Servaes Knaven here just bouncing off the cobblestones. You see how he's hardly holding the handlebars at all, allowing the front part of the bicycle to find what it thinks is the smoothest line across those stones.
I can't believe there is such a thing as a smooth line at all on these stones right now, as the race behind continues to inch slowly but surely closer to those three riders up front. There's Taffy, fourth wheel, and now he's gone up towards the front here as we continue on to good roads.
Now this is an interesting combination again for TVM, the riders in the grey strip which they've adopted this year. They've got Tristan Hoffman in here, they're wearing number 44, and they've also got Hendrik van Dijk. So if these groups come together, TVM will be in a pretty strong position. There's Van Dijk there, sitting at the back of the group. George Hincapie riding sensibly today, not doing too many efforts, doing the effort at the front when he needs to, but realising he needs to look after that energy for the latter part of this race, because after all, once we went through the forest of Arenberg, there was still over 100 kilometres to go to the finish.
Well, here are the three leaders, and it looks as though Jan Boven has not come back up to them, so he must be dropping back to that chase group. It's good to see that the two TVM boys are working pretty hard here. Now, they must know that Peter van Petegem is not in the group that's coming towards them, although we do have the two riders that Paul mentioned. He is in fact in the group further back with Ballerini.
Servaes Knaven is the man on the front. Another section of cobblestones here. This is the cobblestones at the Chemin de Prière. And this is Joe Plancart on the front there, followed very smartly by Andrea Taffy and Hincapie, once again pretty close to the front.
Museo the Lion King, said the sign as we leave that zone of section of cobbles, but the Lion King is very, very worried. Hopefully he's taken a little bit of strength out of the fact he's come safely through the forest of Arenberg, and maybe if he can get the things organised behind, he might still come up towards this front group. There's George, looking very, very good and on form. Don't forget, a brilliant fourth place for him. Oops, a little bit close for Leon Van Bon there, pushed over by Tristan Hoffman towards our motorbike. Eric Zabel going through now, keeping the rhythm nice. There's a nice view for you from our camera bike too, of the big legs of, I think it was Servaes Knaven, and now we have Stefan de Jong, and there we have Tom Steele. Unusual angle, that, Paul?
It certainly is an unusual angle, but these three riders working well at the front, despite the fact there's a big split on behind, they're still managing to hold off the chase. This group now is down to 9 riders. It was originally 14 riders, but they've been split off the back on each section of cobblestones, reduced in their numbers all the time. And in the main field, still, it's the Lampre riders on the front. This is Ludo Dirksen in the mauve strip of Lamprey, another transfer through the winter months to try and bolster the team just for this one race, just for Franco Ballerini and for Paris-Roubaix. Ballerini looking for his third victory in this race, and at the moment in that group, Phil, he doesn't have very many friends willing to help.
Well, that's what happens when you win Paris-Roubaix twice. He is the defending champion too. When he was on Mappé, of course, leading a 1-2-3. The gap is at 2 minutes 10 seconds now, and that will be to the Taffy group. So that doesn't all well for the Lamprey-led group, does it?
Certainly doesn't. We're now on the section of cobblestones at Orchy, and sitting in third position there is Tom Steels, looking very comfortable. He's quite happy to let the two TVM guys set the pace. We're around about 65 kilometres to go to the finish line in Paris-Roubaix, and that's on the velodrome, and Tom Steels quite happy there. The crowd's really starting to turn out here now.
Well, the cobbles are affecting our cameras a little bit here, but this is an enormous crowd here at Orchy. Normally this stretch of cobbles is very, very treacherous in the wet, and it's not so much better in the dust either, because the dust in your eyes and the problems you get picking your way between the grass here says it all. But the crowd enjoying it, and the two Dutch boys used to this sort of cycling, as is Tom Steels. There's the chase group now on the same stretch of cobblestones, Paul. They are closing in.
And on the front is Wilfred Peters, second position George Hincapie, followed very closely by Joe Plancart in the red and green. And in fact the main field, that's an incredible comeback. The last time check we had was 2 minutes and 10 seconds. This is the third group with Ballerini.
We're talking nothing, I would say 30 seconds spread across the whole lot at the moment, and Ballerini and the boys are trying to get back on terms. They really have accelerated these last couple of kilometres, because this gap has tumbled.
And Ballerini himself has come to the front now. He's putting the hammer down. He really is. He's pushing the motorbikes out of the way. He's flying along here. The speed this man is travelling now is in excess of 30 miles an hour, and you can see the gaps in the main field behind starting to appear. He's waited for his team to work perfectly to bring him in within a hair's gap of the group in front, and he's decided, now I'm going to bridge it on my own.
Well, Ballerini, one of a few Italians who loves Paris-Roubaix. He's always said so. He's won it twice. Once when he got the better of Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle, and it was a photo finish. Duclos-Lassalle thought he'd won it. And now Ballerini, this is a big effort by him here to get across to that chase group, at least with Taffy and co in it, and then he will feel he can re-establish himself as a front runner.
This is a very long section of cobblestones, 1.7 kilometres. You get onto tarmac for about 200 metres. There's a left-hand turn at the end. Then you've got another long 1.8 kilometre section. Ballerini realises that is a long section. He's got a big gap there, and I think there's a Mappé rider stuck right on the back there, and that's probably Johan Museu, who's been riding very well so far. Onto the tarmac, and in fact he's gone the wrong way.
He came on the motorbike so fast, I think it ruined his line for him. Ballerini didn't fall off. He's got into the crowd, but Museu came through on his inside, and the chase very much on. I think it's Ludo Dixon who's with him. And let's have a look at that again. Now you see he was right on the motorbike, suddenly realised it was a bit sharp, that bend, and the crowd suddenly went from cheering to a look of fear as Ballerini headed for them. It was Spruck with him, I think.
Spruck, he's having a great classic season. Peter van Petegem has recovered there to move up, as has André Schmeel. But that was an incredible piece of powerhouse work. One of the riders from Cofidis moving forward now. This is Peter Farazijn. He won't do much work because he's got Frank Vandenbroek in front. And you can see now as we look, Phil, almost the whole race is starting to come together. That's the group there with George Hincapie, and they've stopped all of the cars in the gap, so it looks like the counter-attack from Hincapie and Taffy is over.
And so they are being picked up here by the Ballerini-led chase group. He has absolutely flown over these last 6 kilometres to reduce a gap which was out to a minute, and now it's just a matter of closing on. He must be about 100 metres maybe from the back. Nobody helping the chase. In fact, the leader of the World Cup there, the white jersey of Peter van Petegem, not willing to damage the lead perhaps of his two men out front. They're just reassessing.
He's got 4 men out front. He's got 2 men in the leading group, then 2 men in the Taffy group. So he's just quite happy to sit there and leave it all up to Ballerini. The man on the back of that group there is the Latvian national champion, Juris Silovs. And in this group now, there's no major organisation. In fact, Ballerini put a big effort in there to split the group, but nobody wants it to succeed. This is the chase group of Andrea Taffy behind the 3 leaders, and Hincapie still, Phil, I have to say, looking very comfortable in there.
Looking superb, but even so, he must know now that he's about to be joined by a host of riders. as they continue to work together here. Zabel taking the chase, and look at this now. This race could all come together in the next 3 kilometres.
Well, there's the 3 leaders, and the big pressure over the last couple of sections there has brought the gaps right down. The last time check we had for these 3 leaders was a minute over the chasers and a further minute behind the group with Franco Ballerini, and I would say right now it's all in about 40 seconds. Tom Steels must realise now that it's almost over, and he will look over his shoulders and he will see the red, white and green jersey of the champion of Italy, and he will be happy knowing that the Team Mappé have got a strong hold on this race once again.
Well, at least you won't see the whole field coming up as we head now into zone 11, the Chemin des Prières.
1.7 kilometres long. Andrea Taffy, strangely enough, riding at the back. On the right-hand side there is Leon Van Bon and Frank van den Broek in the white and blue strip of Team Cofidis. But once they've hit the cobbles,
look at him go.
Tom Steels has come to the front. He says, if you want me, boys, come and get me, but it's not going to be easy.
This man is looking so strong, and he's been out front now for, well, 200 kilometres really, just on. Take off the few kilometres before he left the pack, and he's still riding like a man possessed here. He seems to accelerate once he gets to the bad roads.
He's only doing this for one reason, that is he's hoping the group behind will split on the cobblestone section, but there's no chase from the group behind. In fact, I would have expected a man like Andrea Taffy, seeing his teammate in front, to come out of the group, try and bridge, and then try and build up a lead with a smaller group. There now you can see is the group with Franco Ballerini, so they're all on the same cobblestone section right now. In that group with Ballerini is Schmiel, Museo and Peter van Petegem.
And they can now see the others, so they're about 250 metres apart. Those motorbikes really shouldn't be quite as close as that, but then we wouldn't be rewarded with that picture if they weren't, as Ballerini continues to set the pace here at the front. So the gap down to 200 metres now as they try to bring this race all together again.
In fact, Phil, Ballerini shut off there. He's waving at the other riders. Nobody's helping him. That looks like Rolf Sorensen just flicking through there, but he's slipping to the back of the group. He's got frustrated here because nobody else will work in the group with him. This is the disadvantage of being in a team where you are the lone leader. If you don't have any teammates, everybody else gangs up on you.
And I counted 4 Mappé riders in that group just then, Paul, and so they're not going to chase, and so it's left really to people like Silovs or Sorensen. But Sorensen also has teammates up here, so the finish, that break is not going to be shut down just yet. These are the 3 leaders clanging over zone number 11 as they race out towards the end of it now. And then I wonder if that chase group will finally finish it off and close them down.
Tom Steels has certainly turned the books around here. I thought it was all over there. I thought the Taffy group was going to join this leading group of 3, but in fact the gap has stretched out again to 30 seconds. You can see there, but it looks very much behind as if the Ballerini group is going to get onto the George Hincapie Taffy group, and then we will have one big group, and that field will then slow down the main field, and that will allow really the group of 3 in front to extend their lead once again.
About 50 metres now. It's looking a bit disjointed, but they're all scrabbling across towards that group just ahead of them, and then it'll just leave those 3 men out front. So it'll give us a bunch of around about 27, 28 riders by the look of it. And then behind the main peloton, which is containing just about everybody else, a long way behind and already out of the hunt, I think.
Well, this is Sorensen on the back of the group trying to get across. A rider from Mappé up there, Johan Museo, Peter van Petegem. They're now onto the same section of cobbles, just 10 seconds behind the chasers with Andrea Taffy and George Hincapie, and it looks as if it's all over, and it's all going to come back together. And the 3 leaders, Phil, in fact you can see from the dust up there, they're not too far ahead either.
They're in the dust with the motorbikes as this group tries to merge here in the big showdown, the first of the main showdowns of the race. We always seem to be able to look back over a Paris-Roubaix when we read all the newspapers the next morning, and you see how they have adopted little areas where they've made the moves that have shaped up the race.
Tom Steels has been on the front since the very first cobblestones of this section here. He's really putting the hammer down. He's waiting for the race to split up behind. He's waiting for Andrea Taffy to come up to him, or even his other teammate who's in that group, and that is Wilfred Peters. But you can see another attack coming here from Andrea Taffy.
Taffy has turned the screw, and George Hincapie has got his wheel here now. Tristan Hoffmann just behind. So the pressure has been applied again now on this stretch of cobbles, and I'm not sure whether that's a long line or just the line of the chase group, or we need a view from the helicopter to see if that group has crossed.
Well, that's what Paris-Roubaix is all about. It's chaos. Nobody really knows what is going on, but in fact the main field here with Ballerini is drifting further back.
it hasn't crossed because those stragglers are off the attack by Taffy. Now this group we saw was only 50 metres off and they still haven't bridged the gap.
Well, that is amazing. I thought it was all back together. The thing is, Taffy is putting a searing attack there. At the back of the group here, you can see Zevgeny Spruk on the right-hand side. You can see Franco Ballerini. So the Lampre guys have said, well, forget it. We're not going to chase us now. We'll let somebody else do the work. Now, that is a dangerous thing to do.
Absolutely.
To come to within 10 seconds and then shut off.
Well, I think they were even closer than that, you know. I reckon 50 metres and no more. And then Taffy may have seen them coming and has turned that attack down the cobbles. And for the moment, at least, he's holding them off. But they might recover. They often do.
Frankie Andreu on the right-hand side there, so that's good for George Hincapie. At least he's got a teammate in the group behind. If anything happens and the group does come back up there, then at least there are 2 US Postal Service riders able to ride together. But this now is a complete change around. I was almost certain that this group was onto the back of the Taffy group, but Taffy is riding well. He saw the danger, he saw the fact that it was all coming back together, and as soon as they hit the cobblestones, he put the hammer down. And in fact, the leading group of 3, Phil, are getting caught right now.
So, as we leave zone 11, the riders are coming steadily but surely back together. In fact, Hincapie and Taffy have gone straight by them here.
In fact, that's Leon Van Bon who's come across there.
Yeah.
Van Bon was the one who made the effort. Taffy made the effort on the cobblestones, but in all of the confusion, as soon as they saw that group of 3, it was nailed back down, and George is riding exceptionally well. He's taking over the front running there. This is the moment when they caught Van Bon in the orange and white, just riding straight past Tom Steels, and Tom Steels said, I'd better get on that express train.
Straight, all 3 riders turn their heads left at the same time there to catch the 2 riders going past. And this is Taffy, and he's attacking now from that group, which has not been joined by the Ballerini group. They're still off the back of it, and this is another pressure point now, as Taffy tries now to straighten things out, because we've got 5 riders up front, and Taffy wants to be one of them.
3 or 4 riders have been split off the back of this group. I thought I caught sight of one of the orange Rabobank jerseys, but you see Taffy now is riding urgently. He's trying to split this group. He feels that the size of the group is too big, which is why there are so many passengers. A lot of riders not wanting to do work. He's trying to reduce the numbers so he can get a small group of 5 or 6 and they will work well together. On his wheel, one of the TVM riders, I think that's Van Dijk, who's got up there.
Henrik Van Dijk, so another TVM man who's having a good day today. First time I spotted him, although he has been in this group all the time. And he's just literally hanging on to Taffy just now. And Taffy just determined to get across by himself. As we look across now, Van Dijk, the big tall man, not a big player at the moment, but you've got to start somewhere. He's slowly developing into being a strong rider.
A former winner of the Grand Prix E3, a kind of mini classic which is held just over the border from France here in Belgium, finishing in the town of Roubaix. It goes over a lot of the big climbs that's used by the Tour of Flanders and races in that area of Belgium, and it really is a good chance to see that TVM have ridden so well, Phil. They've got 4 men in this group now.
George has come back looking at the tail, seeing where it is. Well, we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 riders here now, including the original 3 leaders. Jan Boven we saw dropped. We haven't seen him since, so he must have gone straight through these groups and has gone back down the line.
Amazing, Phil, to see this. We've got a group of 9 riders, 4 TVM and 3 Mapei. Another attack, this time Taffy. That was a dummy attack, really, just trying to see if anybody was paying attention. Steven de Jong insisting here, keeping the pressure on, and it is rather strange because this wasn't attacked by Steven de Jong. He's just ridden off the front.
Well, de Jong looked under his armpit there to see if anybody was coming. The answer was no, so he's going to give it a little go here to see what will develop. His legs must be absolutely smashed right now because he's been up front for so long.
Reaction coming behind. It's good to see Hincapie in the middle of that group coming across there, riding sensibly. I thought last week in the Tour of Flanders he may well have done 1 too many efforts there. He's now riding a lot more sensibly. He's using the other riders to get across these gaps. That was Wilfred Peters there in the big white jersey of Mapei, who nailed back the attack by de Jong. And once again the group starting to rekindle at the front.
And you know what, Paul? That Ballerini group has disappeared behind, and they could have touched these riders and they've gone.
Recuperation at the back here. Joe Plancart dragging up Eric Zabel, and Frank van den Broek again pulling himself up to the lead. Well, it's amazing to note that attack from behind of Ballerini brought them almost onto the tail of this group, and now it's shut down, and the last time check we had was 45 seconds.
Well, George Hincapie has gone now this year from a bit player to a big player. He has been absolutely marvellous in the classics. It's all gone well for him since a tremendous 9th place finish in Milan-San Remo. And then, of course, he's just before he came to the start here, 4th in Ghent-Wevelgem. But this man, Taffy, just keeps on launching attacks, almost if he wants to continually annoys them until they say, well, you can go.
Well, he's not happy. The group is too big and there are too many passengers. There are 4 guys in there from TVM and he's not happy with that. He's trying to reduce the numbers. He's trying to get a small working group. But look at the response there in the counter-attack coming behind. His own teammate, Tom Steels, he too was in that early morning breakaway and he's still covering the moves. He's getting the last bits of energy out of his body to help his teammate put Mappé into a good situation. Then I think we'll see the withdrawal of Tom Steels in the latter few kilometres.
Well, Taffy has been caught, at least by 2 riders for the moment at least, but the rest I think will be not far in coming up to this long thin line of riders, and Taffy would like some help, but he's not going to get it if he keeps on jumping them like that. He's got a split going here. He takes a look over his shoulder, there's the flick of the left arm, and I think it's Tristan Hoffmann here to bring him through. So this is a good strong group, but you see Steels, a cunning rider, has read this split as well.
Good move there by Andrea Taffy. Split the group now. This is much more manageable now. If these guys will work, then they've got a chance of building up their advantage over the rest behind. But they're coming up to a very difficult section of cobblestone shortly. That will be at the section number 9 at Mont-Saint-Pével. There's a short 300-metre section, then a very short section on the tarmac, then a long 3-kilometre section, a tough section, and that's where Taffy could go to the front and build on the advantage that these 5 riders now have got over the split in the chasers.
Henrik van Dijk is the one on the back here for TVM, and Tristan Hoffmann is the guy up further up as we head for that stretch of cobblestones now. And it's amazing, but there's such a real acceleration as soon as riders hit cobblestones. They leave them in that big gear and they just plough on. Now I noticed the Mavic neutral service car waiting on the road to pick these riders up, which indicates now, Paul, they're more than 30 seconds ahead of the Ballerini group that was right there.
That's probably right. They must have really opened up the gap. The last time check we got was 40 seconds, and it's obviously going a lot further than that. A quick section of cobblestones there, back onto the main road. The town you can see at the top there with the spire is Mont-Saint-Pével. A very difficult section of cobblestones coming up shortly. One that, again, on the wet days is absolutely atrocious. Taffy on the front of the group, very urgent, trying to build up an advantage before we go to the next section of cobbles, because now he's happy, now he's reduced the numbers, and he's still got a teammate there, Tom Steels.
Hoffmann setting the pace for the moment. Sitting at the back is teammate Van Dijk. 2 national champions in this breakaway. France and Belgium rather, and Italy, and the champion of America not far out of it yet.
Must be a proud day for George Hincapie to be riding so well in a race like Paris-Roubaix, wearing the champion of the United States jersey on his shoulders. In fact, Hincapie has nailed the gap down there back to the Taffy group, so it's all coming back together once more.
That's amazing. That is amazing, because this 3-kilometre stretch of rather bad road is a good place to get to the front, and Andrea doing what he did in the Forest of Arneberg, but then he wasn't leading the race, of course. Now he is, and sitting right behind him there watching him is Henrik van Dijk. He's also moved off the back.
Moving up to the front in 3rd position there as well, 21, Leon Van Bon. Van Bon, an excellent rider. And further back, Franco Ballerini, still in the 3rd group on the road, and he's not looking too happy just now.
Well, I can't believe that they never got on, and it was because there was no organisation in the end, but really Ballerini should have just tried and bridged the gap alone. So many players in this race would have come back into the action if the group had made the progress, but now they are losing ground all of the time on that lead group because there's so much action up there.
Good to see Frankie Andreu riding pretty close to the front. Frankie becoming a seasoned campaigner in Paris-Roubaix as well. He knows this section. Riders who ride these races so many years on the run, they get to know exactly where to make the move, exactly where to move to the front to be in an ideal position to turn onto the cobblestones in the leading 4 or 5. And in fact, in 3rd place there, you can see the black and blue jersey of US Postal. That was Frankie Andreu.
Well, he's in a group of 15 riders there, which in effect is the 2nd group on the road now. And we've just gone up towards the leaders again to keep an eye on them as they clatter over this 3-kilometre strip of cobbles, which look rather passive at the minute because there's no rain, and they drain pretty well, cobblestones. You need a lot of rain for them to be very, very bad.
Hincapie riding well there, right on the crest of the cobblestones. This is a difficult section by the fact that there's a nice crest along the middle, but because of the heavy weight of the road, the road traffic that goes along here, especially the tractors that go to do the fields, it slips away towards the sides. And in the dry, it's not too bad, but in the wet, it's very treacherous. And if you slip off that central crest, you usually end up on your backside.
6 riders clear at the minute, and we've got 3 national champions here now with the addition of George Hincapie, who's just having a little look round to see who's coming up. Tom Steels is becoming an absolute hero of the day here. He's now moving clear again with another lead group having dictated the race pattern virtually since the off.
A nasty little turn there. You think you've got off the cobbles, but then again it starts almost immediately afterwards. And Taffy liking this, loving this, straight to the front. He's got Tom Steels in second place. Steels actually letting the gap go a little bit there, but you can see Joe Plancart has spotted the difference. What speed that acceleration from Taffy.
The acceleration is incredible. He's just absolutely flying. Tom Steele's commanding the front, but he's not really chasing him. He's just trying to sort of ease him away a little bit. Joe Plancart will have to take up the running if they want to close the gap.
Well, Taffy took off pretty quickly there, but he didn't open up very much more than 10 metres.
I think he's more intent on causing reactions to keep this group away from the chase rather than actually pedal away by himself, because it's still really far too far to go if you're planning on winning by yourself.
Certainly is. He just wants to try and reduce numbers all the time to try and get this group of 5 or 6 riders clear. He's putting the pressure on, and if he can encourage them to work together, then riders from behind like Vandenbroek in the group, who's been caught out by the split, won't have a chance of coming back. 5 riders now chasing. Hincapie, you see Phil riding sensibly. Although he's riding to the front, he's getting across the splits. He's not doing too much work, and that will be good towards the end of this race, because if this group were, for example, to come onto the stadium in Roubaix, George would have a very good crack at the win.
Well, good for George. I mean, he doesn't need any more confidence now. He's sky high. His whole team are telling us how well he's racing. We went for a ride with them actually the day before Ghent Wevelgem on the canals around Kortrijk when we caught them out training, and they were telling us George is just absolutely flying. Well, let's hope he can hold that form at least for another hour or so, because this is looking good for him today. Greg LeMond, by the way, has got the Americans' best ever finish, and that was 4th place.
Van Bon seeing the danger there, knowing that a strong man like Taffy is a good man to get away with. He's leapt across the gap. He's got good acceleration, Van Bon. It comes from his track background. He was 2nd in the Olympic Games in the points race before finishing 3rd in the World Championships a couple of years ago behind Laurent Brochard. And now those 2 guys are off on their own, trying to build up on their advantage.
Well, they've got themselves a little echelon behind down below, with Joe Plancart having to do all of the chasing. The gap is holding. Good piece of road just for the moment at least, as we head now to what will be zone number 8 of the remaining stretches of pavé. Taffy just checking out to see if he should keep up the pressure as Leon Van Bon sits on his back wheel. For some strange reason, poor Leon doesn't want to work.
Well, I wouldn't want to work with Taffy either, the way he's going today. But they will shortly be going through the feeding station. But this is a very strange race, Phil. It keeps splitting up. The riders taking 5, 10, 15 lengths advantage, and then it all keeps coming back together again. Joe Plancart now trying to pull them back up to the leading 2 riders. Plancart obviously smarting a bit, I would think, after his crash last week at the top of the Eichenberg, because he comes from a very long dynasty of cycling heroes. His father was a great cyclist, and in fact he too was brought up looking up to his uncle Eddie and Walter.
The famous Plancart family, all good sprinters by the way. Joe's probably not the greatest of the sprinters, but he has had his 2nd place in this event in the past, and now he'd love to go that 1 step bigger and get the big one. My goodness me, that would be something to take a cobblestone home to the family dynasty. Now this man is riding terrifically today. Andrea Taffy flicks his right arm, takes a good look at Leon Van Bon. Van Bon goes through. He's a really nice little peddler, is Van Bon.
Taffy's got a great position on a bike though. You see how he sits so far back on his machine there. A very Longines figure, and I'm sure that's why he rides so well on the cobblestones. He's got a lot of weight over the back wheel, and that allows him to really use the power. And you need power to ride over cobblestones. You need a certain amount of weight as well, just to be able to keep the bike down on the ground. That riders like Marco Pantani, if they were to come here and ride Paris-Roubaix, they would lose a couple of minutes on the first section of cobblestones.
They probably bounce themselves into infinity, I would think, because they're so light. But Andrea Taffy's having a good season. He started off well in the Tour of Langkawi in Malaysia, where Paul Sherwin was, so he was able to see him firsthand. And now it looks like he's again come good for Paris-Roubaix, because he's always ridden well here. He's never really recovered from the disappointment he felt when he was told he had to finish third behind Johan Museo and Bortolami, when they won the race 1-2-3 for Mapei, and they did it again last year with Ballerini leading them home and Wilfred Peters getting in the frame. And so poor old Andrea knows what it's like to finish second and third in this race, but he's never won it.
But he was strong enough to win last year. But in fact, there's a big argument on the Mapei squad. Everybody wanted to get away and win. You could see that at the start of the day, Johan Museo was one of the big leaders of the race, having won the Tour of Flanders, and then Franco Ballerini. And Ballerini had to escape so far from the finish to end up as the #1 Mapei on the road. And then at the end of it, Andrea Taffy had to play the defensive role. This is the next group on the road. They're starting to recover as well. We've got the 2 TVM riders in there, Servais Carnarvon here, with Frank van den Broek again riding himself back into the race, and Wilfred Peters, the man from Mapei.
Frankie boy riding his first Paris-Roubaix, and his team didn't want him to do it. I think it was the power of the press and public opinion. They wanted to see Van den Broek in this event, and in the end they succumbed and said, okay, he can start. So here he is now, and he's right up, not far off the leaders.
The reason the team didn't want him to start was in fact because they don't feel that it's possible to ride Tour of Flanders, Paris-Roubaix and Liège-Bastogne-Liège and be in fine form on each event, because in this day and age, with the level of international cycling the way it is, they reckon that you have to choose your objectives. You either do Tour of Flanders, Paris-Roubaix, or you do Tour of Flanders, Liège-Bastogne-Liège. But Frankie boy has got a lot of clout when it comes to talking to the team management, and he obviously was wielding a big stick, and they eventually decided to let him ride, and he's riding pretty well, and I think they'll be happy with his performance today because he's bringing them a lot of publicity.
Oh, there's been a crash here. Now this was the leading group, I think.
Well, that's Henrik van Dijk who's gone down there, the big TVM rider. Well, I don't know how that happened at all. He was in the leading group of 6 riders, and they've actually scuttled off right up the road there. Now it's down to 5 riders at the front there. That's the Taffy Hincapie group, and Henrik van Dijk came round the corner. His back end just came from underneath him and up against the curve. The crowd were lucky there was a curb there, and he was thrown around like a rag doll, but he's moving and he's up, and I think he'll be okay.
Well, the helicopter recorded the pictures and they've been played back into our programme, so well done helicopter, but not so well done by the dear Henrik van Dijk there, because that looked like a fall of his own volition. He simply misjudged the angle of that right-hand turn. And here is Frank van den Broek going over the speed humps. I suppose they're good for slowing down cars, but they're really not very considerate for cyclists. But there we are, Van den Broek coming up.
Well, I'm not sure what happened to Van den Broek there. Now he's just catching the 2 TVM riders, and it looks as if the 2 TVM riders in fact have picked up Van Dijk, so the gap's still very small here at the front of the race. Wilfred Peters is in there as well, and Van den Broek may well have just dropped back to the car to pick up some refreshment, but he's now in a group with 3 TVM riders trying to pull themselves back into the race, and the big workhorse from Mapei. Another chance to look at the crash here, Phil. He was in an ideal position, maybe a little bit too close to the back wheel of Tom Steels. He touched the back brake and it just came from underneath him.
Well, that really was a very strange fall. He had his back wheel locked up and it was sliding away from him, and he went down on his face and he's rolled right along. Quite painful, I would think. Anyway, he's up and back in this group now. He's been passed down a line or so, but you're right, Paul, there is not much between any of them here. But what we're seeing now is a Paris-Roubaix which is slowly but surely projecting the strong men of the race, and the riders I think are being eliminated from it are riders like Ballerini, Peter van Petergem and Johan Museu, because they had the chance, they were almost here, and they've fallen away again.
Fallen away quite a long way too, because the last time check we had was 2.5 minutes to the Franco Ballerini Johan Museo group. Now Museo won't mind at all because he's got some good guys up the road. His own friend Wilfred Peters is in one of these groups trying to get himself back up to the right at the front of the race. In fact, Peters dropping his arm back there, he's suffering a bit. He was going to throw Van den Broek into 4th position in that line. Now again, Phil, we get a chance to look at the Ballerini group, and they are going pretty fast because they're in a long line here, but they're not making any headway on the advantage that the leaders have up the road.
So a little bit of a regrouping here, but it's all in vain at the minute. Andrea Taffy just looks over his shoulder, and when he sees riders coming he doesn't want, he puts in another attack and pulls them all the way again. Pont-de-Marc is the town we've just left behind us now, Still the Lamprey boys are trying desperately to shake something out here, but they're having an awful lot of problems, as now Ludo Dirksons tries to get a little bit more interest again. I cannot believe they got as close as they did, 50 metres off the back, and they've fallen back like this.
Ballerini should have put the hammer down and closed down that final 10 metres. It was so close you could almost reach out and touch the group in front. What's happening now, though, is the big teams who've got men up the front are burying Ballerini's chances. Johan Museo is in that group, but he's not going to get the Mappé boys to chase because they've got 3 Mappé riders up the road. TVM guys in this group won't chase because they've got 4 TVM riders up the road. So it's going to be very difficult, and at the moment all the responsibility is being left to Lamprey, and there are only 3 Lamprey riders in this group. One of them Ballerini, so he's not going to chase.
It's not looking good, that's for sure. Now I think this is zone number 8 we just entered here now, round about 45 kilometres from the finish. Tom Steele's tucked in at the back here of rider 37, which is Joe Plankett.
Tom Steele has done an incredible race, because let's not forget he was in that early morning breakaway and he's still in with the action in this race. You get a chance there just to see how bad some of these cobbles are. They really are very rutted, and you do have to ride over them as fast as possible. The big crowds turning out now because this is a magnificent day for Paris-Roubaix, and these corners, Phil, are the most dangerous part of the cobblestones. The group now down to 5 after that crash of Van Dijk, and always on the cobbles now on the front it's Andrea Taffy. There's a problem for Taffy.
Well, Taffy has got a back wheel puncture. They'll have seen him come out. He's in such a hurry here, Paul. He's grabbed a wheel from somebody in the crowd, and he's even changing it himself.
Well, I reckon that is somebody from Mappé. This is not normally a legal move, but all of the teams do it. All of the teams have somebody standing on the side of the road trying to make sure if one of their riders has a problem, there is a wheel there. That was a very quick wheel change, and the way he veered across the road, I reckon he knew the face of that person.
Well, that puncture has come at around about 35-36 kilometres from the finish here. Now look at this, Tom Steele is backing them off, and that's why Leon Van Bon is having a go, because he's trying to slow the group down.
Well, he's obviously not very happy about being left in a group with 3 riders. He will be the most tired of the group, but Van Bon realises the danger. He's going to pick the pace up and give Andrea Taffy a tough ride back to the front. Taffy is back up and riding, but he's now been caught, Phil, by the chase group. He's got a teammate there in Wilfred Peters. He's with the 3 TVM riders and Frank van den Broeke. So he's still got a chance to pull himself back into the race, but that was pretty cool thinking when he switched across there to get that wheel.
Well, he's done it, and he's still in the group here, which has just come by him. But his morale, what's that going to be like now? He must have felt so confident, dictating the pace. There's where he did it. He almost took out Leon Van Bon in his rush to get the wheel.
Leon Van Bon almost took out George Hincapie as well. But you have to be alert when you ride a race like Paris-Roubaix, and I would think his morale now is really rock bottom. He was riding on the crest of the wave. He was riding perfectly over all the sections of cobblestones. He was in a leading group of 5 riders. Then all of a sudden, psss, and the tyre's gone down.
Well, he's on the back of a strong teammate in Wilfred Peters here. We've got Van den Broeke also in this group. He knows exactly the time gap now because he's seen both ends of the spectrum, and he'll be saying to himself, I've got to get across again. Can he do it? I wonder.
Well, the 3 TVM riders in this group will be of some help, although 2 of them have been at the front of the race for a long time, so they won't be in super form. He will look for an ally in Frank van den Broeke, who I think is riding exceptionally. Maybe not one of the strongest riders on the cobblestones, but he's riding with so much courage when they get on the good pieces of tarmac section that will be a big help. Now the word's gone to Wilfred Peters. Come on, let's get to the front. We've only got Tom Steele up there. Only. Let's not forget he won Wevelgem a couple of days ago, but the disadvantage of having Tom Steele's there is he's been at the front for a long time, and he's certainly got heavy legs.
He has to be tired, as Zone 8's going to be remembered then by Andrea Taffy. That's where he had his misfortune. Nearly said his malfunction, but he's been functioning pretty well today. As we now move on, and we're heading now towards zone number 7. 7 more sections of cobblestones to come. Frank van den Broeke there, looking okay and pedalling very smooth. He's such a young man, and he's absolutely saturated in natural talent.
24 years of age. In fact, when he started off as an athlete, he was the cross-country champion of Belgium when it was held in his own town of Ploegster, which is just across the border from Armentières. The leading group of 5 riders, and obviously in 4th position.
There,
yeah, 4, in fact, because Taffy's been dropped. The leading group of 4. the last man always now is going to be Tom Steels. He'll sit on the back and he will be hoping and praying that he'll get some reinforcements from Team Mappé.
Well, I can't imagine. He must be delighted with the fact he is sitting on the back, with every just reason to do so now, because he's been up front for so long. He's got to be feeling this pace.
But this is great for George Hincapie. It's now down to 4 riders. If this race situation stayed as it is on the road, he would at least equal the record of Greg LeMond as the best placed American rider in Paris-Roubaix.
I think George wants a podium place today. He's certainly riding like he deserves it. So a helicopter hovers over the field here, which is group number 3, as they leave zone number 8. They may not even know that Taffy punctured in that zone as Dirksons tries to continue to pull his team leader up towards that front group. But I do feel it's all in vain now.
At this moment in time, I reckon Franco Ballerini is asking himself, did I make the right decision switching across from Mappé to the squad of Lampre? There's Stefano Zanini, another 4th place finish for him in Paris-Roubaix a couple of years ago. Marcus Seberg going through there as well. Peter Farazijn, Bart Lezen, Sevgeny Spruk, Schmiel, Van Pietergem.
And the World Cup leader's not having such a good day today, is he?
Well, he's probably celebrated his victory in the Tour de France a few times last week, because for him, he reckoned it was the most important race he could ever win. But in the front group of 4, Phil, there's no organisation. They're very upset by the fact that Steels is sitting on, because you never want to take a man like Steels to the finish anyway. Whether or not he's tired, you put him on a finishing straight and he's going to go like a drag racer.
Of course. And George is also aware of it too. And he's not a bad sprinter himself in the right company. George Hincapie. Leon Van Bon is another good fast sprinter too.
And so is Joe Plankart.
Yeah.
Finished 2nd here in Roubaix, winning the sprint for 2nd place a couple of years ago. But now they're all losing momentum, because they realise sooner or later the power of Taffy, and Taffy with Wilfred Peters must certainly come back up to this leading group of 4.
Well, they're getting disheartened by the fact they're towing Steels, that's for sure. And they're having to do all of the work. But where is Andrea Taffy? We've gone back here to the group containing him. That was the wheels of Wilfred Peters we were looking at. Seves Canavan is the rider tagged on at the back. He's also been in the thick of the action as long as Tom Steels has today, as indeed has Stefan de Jong, getting something out of his back pocket there. And they could be dragged back into this lead group at any moment.
Well, their disadvantage from the leaders is around about 25 seconds at the moment, so Taffy won't worry too much. He's got a very strong man with him, Wilfred Peters, who I reckon has to be the super domestique of the international circuit these years, and definitely worth his weight in gold, because he's the kind of rider, he doesn't think about UCI points, he doesn't think about World Cup points. All he thinks about is doing the job for the team.
Well, at the moment this has become the dumping ground for the unfortunate, because Hoffman is back here in Van Dijk, and now we've got in fact also Andrea Taffy. Taffy going through on the other side. Vandenbroek deciding not to follow his wheel through. Wilfred Peters is going to have to pick it up.
Wilfred Peters can't pick it up. Sorry, boys. I'll just have a quick breather here and leave it up to the grey train. There you can see the group, the front group, just going off to the right-hand side. And that's the amazing thing about a race like Paris-Roubaix. The roads zigzag left and right so much across these roads of the north of France that you always get a chance to have a rough idea where your prey is, where the people are that you're chasing.
It shows me that Vandenbroek doesn't seem too keen to offer any assistance, but that's the second group on the road with a real chance of contacting these leaders. So maybe Frank Vandenbroek is feeling tired. We're now going into what will be for him a very long race indeed. We've gone through the 200-kilometre point some while ago.
Well, after his Tour of Flanders performance, this is probably the second longest race that Frank Vandenbroek has ever ridden. And at the end of the day, he's riding sensibly there, because he's with 2 riders from Mappé, he's with 3 riders from TVM, and he's got a fairly good excuse to sit on the back of that group and say, sorry guys, I'm a bit isolated here, I'll leave it up to you.
Well, I know I've said it before, but let me remind you that the helicopter on a flat countryside like this is telling that chasing group exactly where these leaders are. And so they know the gap is not very much here at all. Hincapie in a breakaway, and there he is. This is going down really well in America, and the US Postal Service boy is on form. He's looking so good, Paul. There was no sign of fatigue on that face.
It's amazing to think that over the years the American teams initially came here to races like Paris-Roubaix just to participate, but today George Hincapie is not just participating in this race, he is actually part of the action. He is forming the shape of the race, and he is regarded by myself as a real player and with a good chance for victory today.
Well, they are now inside the final hour of racing, these four riders. That's all they've got. There's around about 40 odd kilometres to go. If that, these four riders are clear. And one would expect now that the group behind are going to have to do something about it. We're on the outskirts of Lille, actually, because that's Lescun and the airport there, which is the servicing airport for this part of France and Belgium. And the boys now, well, the way they go to Roubaix is still a lot longer, but you could get to Roubaix in approximately 15 minutes from here.
That's the amazing, torturous thing about Paris-Roubaix. You are never in the final hour of racing very much further than 20 kilometres away from Roubaix, but the race now has to zigzag across the countryside to find these sections of cobblestones, and they are very difficult sections of cobblestones. Many of them, in fact, have preservation orders on them to try and keep them around for the Paris-Roubaix to come. George Hincapie leading them round the corner there. No slowing down on those cobbles.
What a wonderful race. What other sporting event in the world would bring out these thousands of people into fields to watch bike riders race over cobblestones? And we have an American and a Dutchman up here at the moment rubbing shoulders, a Belgian national champion and Joe Plankett, and they're working well together. This is further down now. It looks as though this is the Taffy group which has been split. Now who's done the work?
Well, this is split completely. There was Servais Knaven going out to the back. This is Hendrik van Dijk coming up here. The next man we're going to pick up is in fact Frank Vandenbroek, and there's two more riders up the road.
Well, it's got to be Peters and Taffy because they're the only two left here, and in fact Vandenbroek trying to get back on terms with them. We never saw them actually go, but they must have jumped one of them, and my guess is it would be Taffy, as soon as they started zone 7.
Well, he's been the strongest man so far over every cobblestone section. He used the TVM riders very sensibly there. He worked with them to reduce the gap, to keep it within a reasonable distance. And then once they hit the cobblestones, he and Wilfred Peters put the hammer down. And you can see, in fact, the front group is just up there. That bit of chaos, those few motorbikes, that is what he's aiming for.
Well, Andrea Taffy and Wilfred Peters, the riders who rode so well in Paris-Roubaix last year when they were second and third, are now moving towards the leaders yet again. These two will not give up, and this could turn out to be to the advantage of Taffy. He punctures and drops the back group, picks up Peters and goes back to the front group, and it all works out hunky-dory.
Well, you have to have some good luck, but that's a good ride. Look at that Vandenbroek. I've said he wasn't very good on the cobblestones, but he accelerated over the last 500 metres there and closed the gap to the two Mapei riders. And let's not forget, last year he was their teammate. He knows them very well, but he's got to close it down now, because once they open up the gas, if he's not on the wheel, he'll be left again in no man's land.
Well, what a great bike rider Vandenbroek is. And he's going to get back to them, that's for sure. So there's three riders going forward to the four front runners. And the way they're going to bridge the gap. The sun has come out full power now. A most pleasant afternoon if you're not riding Paris-Roubaix. And they're joining. Peters has checked him out.
There are the yellow bikes. Once you see the yellow bikes, those are the neutral service bikes in Paris-Roubaix, because of the nature of the race and because of the fact that very often the cars cannot keep up with the riders. They use neutral service motorbikes to take spare wheels, and once you see those, you know you're coming up to a group. The three chasers now have got the four leaders as we come now into the town of Eneverland. This is a cobblestone section, but it's not really cobblestones. It's more like a supermarket forecourt compared to what they've come over so far.
Well, they're moving too, as you can see, with Leon Van Bon and Plankett feeling he might have a result here to take back to the family, because time's running out for the rest. But there is the pursuit, and in front are the rabbits, and it's going to be 7, Paul.
It's going to be 7. You can see what a man. I have to say, I've known Frank Vandenbroek for a very long time, because I actually raced with his uncle Jean-Luc on the La Redoute team many years ago. And Frank, as a kid, used to come out and look at us in envy as we went off on our big training rides. And he certainly has matured into an excellent bike rider. He's had a lot of problems, though, with his knee, because his knee was actually broken as a child because he was watching the 24 Hours of Ypres, a 24-hour motorcar rally, and one of the cars went off the course and hit him and broke his leg. And that has caused him serious problems over the last few years, and a lot of people think that although he's got great class, he is a fragile rider.
Well, I hope you're not going to tell me he's riding this on one leg, because this guy is pretty hot. And he's now got to the front of these two Mappé boys. Here comes the message from Mr. Lefebvre. On board goes the food. And Andrea Taffy and Wilfred Peters are now back at the head of this race. Peters taking longer than Taffy, of course. So it looks as though he's recovered from the puncture.
George Hincapie there just trying to accelerate a little as the junction is about to be made, but he can see that he's not going anywhere. And this is the chaos when two groups come back together. Everybody goes back to the car to get some drinks, to get something to eat. Joe Plancart doing likewise here with Frank Vandenbroek's uncle Jean-Luc in the car there.
Yeah, they're not really the best of friends either, Frank and Jean-Luc anymore, which is a great shame. But Taffy has just come on and he's off again. Is there no holding this man?
Clever move. He was the first one to take a bottle at the back of the group there. As soon as he joined the group, he went to the team car, took his bottle and knew there'd be some chaos. Wilfred Peters was on his wheel. Peters now has let the gap go and he's forcing Joe Plancart to come across and close down the gap. But that was a good move by Taffy, but I think it's going to come back together.
But Taffy just will not stop trying here. The sun is high in the sky and the champion of Italy is trying again to break up this lead group, and this time of course he has two men back there now in the form of teammates. Peters has come up to join Tom Steels. We just don't know how tired Tom Steels is, but he's been out front for an awful long time. As I say, in the region of 28-29 kilometres left to go. And now there's two riders in that chase group will not interfere with the attack of Taffy, so it's going to be left to George Hincapie and the others to have a go. Steele sitting at the back and Wilfred Peters there spoiling the chase at the front. Advantage at the moment, definitely running the way of Andrea Taffy.
That'll certainly play to the advantage of Taffy having two guys sitting on this group of six behind, but I felt certain that there when they started to move up to his wheel there, Joe Plancart was going to close it down. He came to within 5 bike lengths and now he's hovering at about 75 metres off this group of six.
Well, this is a very different Paris-Roubaix to what we normally see. These riders have had to come up in small groups to contact the breakaways rather than a big working party. This man has been nothing but trouble all day with his constant attacking, and now he's making his final bid for home. And I don't know whether he might have found himself out front too soon, but he's certainly looking at his face here. He's definitely making this the one that will count.
He's looking at about 30 kilometres to go to the finish line. He's just getting down to the job at hand. He's not a great rider solo against the clock. In fact, he did have one victory to his credit in a time trial as a professional, and that was at the opening stage of the Tour de Langkawi last year. But the majority of his victories, Phil, have always been lone victories, so he does like to get out and win on his own if he can. But for the moment, he's got a long way to go.
A pro for, well, I guess this is his 11th season now. He turned pro in 1989. He's had 26 wins so far. And the group behind now are going to be annoyed by the fact they can almost reach him but can't at the minute. Vandenbroek swings off the front now, takes a good look at the other riders. Hincapie goes through, puts his head down and gives it maximum effort and then swings off. So they're doing short turns, Paul, so they're trying to get back to him.
32 years of age. He had a very good start to the season again this year at the Tour de Langkawi. Although he didn't come up with any victories, he was always in his usual attacking style. But then when he returned from there, he had a bit of a problem with his wisdom teeth and had to have an operation and had 2 of those removed. But he seems to have bounced back from that little operation, and at the moment he's trying to get himself into a reasonable rhythm. But it's a long way to go. You're looking at an effort here of around about 45 minutes. So if he's going to try and stay clear of those riders behind, he's got to find himself a good tempo, one that he can sustain.
Well, just look at this now. Look at that face. This is the part that hurts when you try to build the leads. He's allowed himself a little look over his shoulder to see if the reaction is good or bad, but he's about the same. He doesn't seem to be going clear just now.
Frank Vandenbroek coming to the front, but you see Mappé playing a very good move here. Whenever they start to get organised, a Mappé rider comes up in second place and forces Van Bon to take a longer ride round to keep the line going. That breaks up the rhythm of the chasers. 6 men, and there now the gap's starting to open. It's around 200 metres now, and they've got to try and nail him back pretty rapidly, because once he gets onto the cobblestone sections, that'll be hard to do.
Look at the speed, 60 kilometres an hour. We're on flat roads. That's 38 miles an hour by Andrea Taffy. Well, the French are pretty proud about the solid railway track on the left of him here, because that's their famous train of Grande Vitesse, the very fast train that can top 300 kilometres an hour. And this man here is pushing the Paris-Roubaix up to levels we don't normally see as well.
A great ride by him, but he doesn't feel all that confident. All his attacks so far today have come to nothing. This is why he keeps looking over his shoulder just to try and see if he is opening up the gap, because he realises there are some strong riders in that group behind, guys like George Hincapie and Van Bon who can work well, but his big advantage is having two teammates in the group there.
Well, he couldn't get much closer to the grass line of the course there, but he's okay. This is smooth road, he hasn't got to be there. But he's making sure now that he keeps this rhythm and tries and gets out of sight and out of mind. He's pushing it ahead now. He's probably about 20-25 seconds at the minute in front of the pack. But as I said, and as Paul has said, those two Mapai riders at the back are now doing wonderful things in breaking up the concentration of that chase group.
A huge armada of motorbikes right behind Andrea Taffy, and each one will take turns to move up to the front to take a picture of the man who is currently leading Paris-Roubaix, a popular rider not only with the riders but also with the press, because he's always in a good mood, always got something decent to say.
Well, those legs, as he concentrates, are tapping out the message. Second and third in Paris-Roubaix, they're saying, but we've never got there for the win yet, and now that's hopefully will be what it will be next time. Francesco Moser used to love this race. He won it 3 times straight, and he really was the man to beat on each occasion, and he didn't get beaten, of course. This rider has been beaten, but he dreams one day he might get the cobblestone to take home. By the way, his wife Gloria is waiting at the finish, and so too his young son Tommaso. And so if you don't really need much better of a magnet than that.
Great position, Andrea Taffy, longer line stretched out on his machine. He looks just like a track pursuiter. This is the group behind, the group of 6 riders. Jean-Luc Vandenbroucke coming up alongside there to have a quick word with Joe Plancart, encourage him to keep the pressure on, try and encourage the other riders in the group to work. And in fact, a little shout from the man in the back of that car there, that was Jean-Jacques Vandenbroucke, the father of Frank, who is wearing the white and red jersey of Cofidis. Difficult situation for him to be in, because he's a mechanic for the Lotto team, and yet his son rides for a different squad.
Yes, family ties, always a bit of a problem, but anyway, Frank Vandenbroucke is having a great Paris-Roubaix today, and so too is George Hincapie. He's saying to the guys, come on, let's start working and keep working. It's no good pointing at the 2 Mape boys, because they're not going to help anybody. There we are, 30 kilometres still to go.
And at this speed, that's going to take Andrea Taffy 40 seconds. He's looking good, he's tapping out the rhythm now, and he knows that there are a few sections of cobblestones to go which are still pretty tricky. You've got the cobblestone section at Sizouin, and then one of the most tough, difficult sections in the final kilometres, the Pavé de l'Arbre, which is built up into 2 sections, and he'll be thinking about the fact that even though you're in the lone lead, there's always a possibility of mechanical failure.
Well, if he can stay clear till the L'Arbre stretch, then he'll know he can pick up the victory if he's got a lead of around about 45 seconds at that point. Crowd here, standing on every corner. And Taffy, well known in this part of France. Just like André Schmil is now, he's become a naturalised Belgian, but he used to live in Roubaix. And now you can see the earpiece there. I've always wondered about the earpieces. For my money, they shouldn't be allowed, because riders should get on with the racing and shouldn't have to be guided by their director sportif. It takes a lot of fun out of it, but even so, I would be rather annoyed if the director sportif was telling me to go faster and I was feeling a bit tired.
There's advantages and disadvantages, but it is the sign of the modern era of professional cycling. And the fact is, it is so important for teams and sponsors to win events that they want to make sure that the riders don't make any tactical errors out on the course. That right-hand corner there, taking the riders now into the town of Sizouin. And once you go through there, it indicates that you've got 26 kilometres left to go to the finish, and a very long section of cobblestones here. In fact, reminds me of the year when André Schmil won the event, because Johan Museeuw made an incredible chase back to almost catch André Schmil and got to within 20 or 30 bike lengths of the big racing Russian as he was at the time, and then just died, and he wasn't able to go on any further and finish second at the end of the day.
Well, this 97th edition of this wonderful Queen of the Classic races is turning out to be an absolute stormer today. The big names are here. There's a real chance now. America is going to have a wonderful finish to this event. Although Taffy at the moment spoiling it for everybody else, but you can't deny him his place at the front. Everything has been against him. He's recovered from that puncture and he went straight away. He didn't even blink an eyelid. As soon as he caught the leaders, he attacked.
Wilfred Peters there just jumping over one of the directional islands. That was a pretty cool piece of riding by him. But at the front, the man who is really stamping his authority on this race at the moment, riding a Colnago machine, is Andrea Tafi. And I have to say, throughout the developments in cycling, Colnago has always refused to make any adaptations to his machine. He's always felt that Paris-Roubaix could be ridden on a standard bike, and he's never once opted for the pneumatic front forks.
Well, it'd be worth turning pro for Mappé just to get one of those bikes, actually. I've always wanted to ride one. But you notice there, Paul, hardly any mud on his seat tubes at all today, so it's not been a very dirty Paris-Roubaix.
It hasn't been dirty at all. There was a lot of threat of rain over the last couple of days here in the north of France, and many of the riders opting to go and ride the course on Friday just to see what the conditions were going to be. And one of those men is a little bit further down the road at the moment, Johan Museo, because he only made the decision at the very last minute as to whether to ride this event or not.
Joe Plankett taking on food as George, Joe and Leon are the pace setters now, while Tom is not doing too much. Frank would like to. I think he's getting a bit tired, and Wilfred certainly isn't.
They'll start to get a bit annoyed at having these passengers on. It really does get into the morale and wear you down, having a guy like Wilfred Peters and Tom Steele sitting on a breakaway. Vandenbroek, the team manager of Lotte there, constantly coming up to the front, constantly talking to Joe Plankart, trying to encourage him to organise the chase with the other riders. This now is the group of Franco Ballerini, more than 3 minutes behind the leading rider Andrea Tafi on the road. In this group, Johan Museo, André Schmeel, Peter van Petegem, the names that we talked about as the big favourites before the start of Paris-Roubaix this morning, and they have been leaving all of the work in the group still to the mauve and pink jerseys of the Lamprey squad, and again it's still Ludo Dirksen on the front.
Well, what a hapless lot they are too. The Lamprey brought their team leader to almost within spitting distance of the group, and then they fell away again. I guess Ballerini made the effort too hard and didn't have the legs left to finally close the gap. They've fallen out of it now. Frankie Andreu passing through there as well, which is good to see him. Always enjoyed his Paris-Roubaix, Frankie has. Eric Zabel, who was up with the leaders, is now back in this bunch. They've just come in the picture there in that white jersey.
You have to wonder, Phil, about that corner coming on the cobbles at Orchy, and if in fact Franco Ballerini hadn't taken it so fast, if he hadn't gone slightly off course there and he'd taken a fast move around that corner, if that would have given him enough to get onto the back wheel of the chase group of Andrea Tafi, that could have been the most important part of this race for Franco Ballerini today.
Well, at least he has the consolence that he has won this race on 2 previous occasions. But look at this now, into the dust of the cobblestones being caused by the cars pulling away from the head of the race here. And Tafi just pushing so hard over the cobbles. A little bit of dust in the sides there, which is what he's trying to ride on rather than the stones. But it's a very difficult piece of pavé, this, especially when the crowd is so close to you.
This is the cobblestone section at Cizois, and you can see Tafi dragging himself right across to the left-hand side. They're riding as close as he can to the hard piece of dirt which is on the side of these cobblestone sections. This is something you can only do on a day like today, and days when Paris-Roubaix is wet and damp. You can't even dare to go to the edge of the cobblestones because it is just so dangerous. But the speed of Andrea Tafi over these cobblestones is absolutely remarkable. He's a lot stronger over these sections than on there. You can see, in fact, he was having to lift his bike over a section where the cobbles were starting to break up a bit, but he's got the control. He was out of the saddle, almost lifting his bike into the smoothest part to try and avoid any chance of an impact puncture.
But he does ride these cobblestones magnificently, doesn't he? He keeps his pace, speed up all the time. He rides heavy gears because that's the best way to get over them. Ride them fast and down the middle if you can, and hope nothing goes wrong. And this is the crowd we used to see, of course, in the forest of Arenberg. Then they would move across here to see this, and then they catch up on the radio to see who wins down the road in Roubaix. Leon Van Bon, Tom Steels, and now Mappé have got second and third wheel here, which is not a good sign.
Tom Steels, he must be riding on pure morale at the moment, knowing the fact that he has to defend this right up to the final kilometre. He's sitting there in second position. He's obviously hurting, having been at the front of the race since the opening kilometres, but he's just sitting there on the wheel of Leon Van Bon, hoping to discourage the chase.
Well, they just about see the road, never mind the leader right now with the crowd here. So Steels is just sitting in behind Van Bon, knowing that his team captain, the champion of Italy, is gaining second by second over the group. It's not a winning margin by any means yet, but it's going out towards 1 minute now.
Taffy back on the next section of cobbles. That section at Cizoin has a little break in the middle with some tarmac. Then you take a right-hand turn and drop back down towards the main road again. This is a very difficult section. Switching across there, he's trying to keep himself in the middle because you can see the crowd getting right into the edge of the road there. These people, as you've said, will be watching the TV and rushing outside to see Paris-Roubaix come past their front door. That's the end of the section of cobblestones number 4, and that was Cizoin. Just a little bit further up the road here, he will reach the main road, the tarmac road, with a left-hand turn, which will take him on to the next section at Bourguel.
Now, there's a bit of acceleration at the front here now, because again they've caught Frankie van den Broek in trouble at the back as they now try to shut it down at the front. But it's Leon van Bon this time. He's tagged on to by Tom Steels. Peters also dashing up on the left of our picture, and Planker trying to get his wheel. So it looks as though Van Bon trying something here now on zone number 4. But the two Mappe boys are very, very strong.
Very alert, always in the action. They know just exactly what their job is. As soon as they see an acceleration, they're up into second and third position. I have to say though, number 81, Frank van den Broek at the back, looking in difficulty. Every time there's an acceleration over these cobblestones now, he seems to be dropping off 4 or 5 lengths. Let's not forget, he's probably the lightest rider in this group. I feel much more of a climber than a rider for these cobblestone classics like the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix, but he's riding this with sheer courage and determination.
Well, good for him as he continues on in the hope. As we look at low angle now on the nice bronze legs of Andrea Taffy, who set himself a long way to the finish to win this race. Not many riders have ridden away like this to victory in Paris-Roubaix, and he hasn't done it yet either. Although one is getting the feeling this is beginning to look like the winning move, because with the 2 guards in that chase group, he's going to feel pretty confident. I don't contemplate, Paul, that we'll get a Mappe 1, 2, 3 again, because the first time it happened when Museo won, followed by Bortolami and then Andrea Taffy, I remember saying at the time, you'll probably never see this again in the history of the race. Now, of course, it happened again last year, and there is a possibility with those 2 riders in the chase group it could happen again now.
Certainly could. It's really amazing that Mappe have made this race their very own. They get so motivated, but they have the riders who love this race in the squad. Men like Johan Museo, men like Taffy, previously men like Ballerini, who lived for this one race. You have to be a special rider to get psyched up for Paris-Roubaix. You have to love the race because it is a race of legends. It's an old-fashioned race. It's a race where men still have to be men. You're going to have bad luck thrown at you throughout the day, and you have to not just give up. You have to bounce back. Andrea Taffy went through that situation just a couple of sections of cobblestones ago. Riding on the crest of a wave, he looked as if everything was going right, and a flat tyre at a bad time, and he had to drag himself back into the race. And that's exactly what this race is all about, Paris-Roubaix. You spend the couple of hours after the race in the showers and listen to the stories, and everybody has a story of bad luck.
Patrick Lefevre there getting as excited as Taffy and giving him the morale boost he needs for the last half hour or so of racing. Van den Broek does look a little bit tired now with that close-up on his face. He's suffering now, but he's still willing to go through, taking Hincapie with him. Hincapie looks really cool out there just now, and Leon van Bon goes through as well. And it looks as though Van den Broek quite prepared to do a longer stint on the front too.
Van den Broek a lot more comfortable on the tarmac sections of this race here. Obviously, because he's quite light, he's having difficulty on the cobblestones, but as soon as it gets to a fast section of road, he's prepared to come to the front and work with the rest of the group. And in second position, you've got to see George Hincapie looking good. 3 minutes and 10 seconds. That is the gap back to the Franco Ballerini and Johan Museo group.
I almost went cold when I read it, because I thought he got 3 minutes 10 seconds out of the group he'd left. But Paul's absolutely right. That leapfrogs over the group behind. Circa 1¼ minutes is the gap now back to the group which he has left. That's still a lot.
It's still a pretty big gap. When it looked initially as if he'd only opened up 100 metres, 120 metres, he didn't get his gap easily, but it is now starting to build. You can see the helicopter, just little dot there, that indicates where the chasing group of riders is, so they're still not completely out of sight and out of mind, and they will be dreaming of bringing themselves back up to Andrea Taffy.
Well, this is the group that chases. Hincapie's turn on the back now. 2 Mappes in the middle. Leon van Bon is having a great race too. He's such a plucky rider, little Leon. He's a good sprinter, a reasonable climber. He's had a bronze medal, don't forget, in the World Road Race Championships as well. But right now, the two Mappé boys must be feeling as though they're in a great position.
Van den Broek, great position on this bike. He really tapping out an incredible rhythm there as we go back to the man at the front of the race, who is himself tapping out a pretty diabolic rhythm on his bicycle, just thinking about the dream that he has of riding into Roubaix wearing that tricolour as champion of Italy.
Well, as the kilometres tick off, he must be feeling that a little bit more confident now. There's still a couple of zones still to go as over to his coffee's car goes Van den Broek for a word. Considering he wasn't going to ride this event, he's now in the race for second place right now, as to is George Hincapie, of course. Let's not forget that.
George riding a sensible race, obviously trying to take advantage of for all of the other riders in this group here, trying to conserve as much energy as possible. He has launched some pretty serious attacks on occasions as Taffy now goes past the 20 kilometres to go banner. He'll take a left turn here onto this pretty difficult section of cobblestones here. Section number 4 is known as Bourgel, and almost immediately after this section there is a long 1.8 kilometre section, the Rue de Bouvines.
This looks like the stretch of cobblestones where Sean Kelly once snapped his handlebars or his forks. I can't quite remember which it was, but I know he was in desperate trouble at the time. It's the one section too where the cobbles are bad, and if there's any loose parts after a day of banging over these stones, then they'll begin to fall off about now.
Taffy's making easy work of it. The crowd really urging him on. He's a popular rider with everybody here because of his performances in Paris-Roubaix in the past, as you've said, third and second. He's still got the power to stick in the middle of the cobblestone sections. You can just see the crest there in the middle. He drops down a little bit because it is smoother towards the left-hand side, and he's keeping the power on, keeping himself as fast as possible. And the faster you go over the cobblestones, it is hard to believe, but it is a lot easier.
And still he trundles that big gear, his whole body behind the pedals right now. He just doesn't alter his style on that bike at all. He just holds his hands in the middle and keeps pushing back to the 20 kilometres to go. Didn't seem like much over a minute to me, as we now look too, as these riders swing on to the next sector of Pavé as well.
Look at that good tactical move there, first and second around the corner, the two Mappé riders. They will try and slow them down even more on this cobblestone section. The thing about the cobblestones is you cannot organise a chase. It has to be one man on the front setting the tempo, and that is going to now go into the advantage of Mappé. They put their two men round there at the front of this group. They will ride at a pace which is just uncomfortable, but will prevent somebody else taking over the pacemaking. And by the end of the section, it will give the advantage again to Taffy, who may well be able to open up a further 10 or 15 seconds advantage.
And just think, George Hincapie himself had the chance of signing for Mappé this year. He didn't take it. He wanted to stay loyal to the American outfit. And while that should be applauded, I wonder what he's thinking now. If he had the Mappé shirt on his shoulders, who knows?
If he had the Mappé shirt on his shoulders, he'd probably be riding the defending role for Andrea Taffy. Taffy further up the road. You can see this in the bad weather can be a terrible section. You have the grass pushing up through the cobblestones there. This section, in fact, is where my best man crashed when he was in the leading group with Sean Kelly a few years ago. Alain Bondu, a former two-time world pursuit champion, he was in the group with Kelly here, and he fell off on the side of the road and chased Kelly all the way to the finish line and never managed to make it. And Kelly finished first across the line ahead of Rudy Rogiers.
And Alain Bondu, who retired not long ago, he's now involved with the Cofidis team, and he's got a man in the breakaway here in the form of Van den Broek. The breakaway not here, but there, I should say now, because this rider is slowly but surely pulling clear of them, and it's all happening because the Mappé boys are controlling the front of this chase. And I think the impetus going out of it too, because they know in the heart, I think, they're not going to catch Taffy now. Plankett is hardly accelerating up here. He's more interested in picking his way between the couples, and also George Hincapie likewise, and Leon van Bon. But I can't get over the apparent strength here of Tom Steels, because he joined the leaders today after 30 kilometres and he's still there.
Great ride, fantastic performance by Tom Steels, the Belgian champion. First this week in Gent-Wevelgem, today riding off in that early breakaway, which went clear after just 30 kilometres, getting to the cobblestone section in the lead, riding a defensive race after that, and now he's still got the power left to do the work for his team, Team Mappé. But he's obviously boosted his morale by the fact that they are in a strong position. He knows that whatever happens, if Taffy gets caught, I reckon a man like Wilfred Peters could win the race today, because Peters is just sitting there. He is looking very comfortable, while you can see the laboured style on the front of Tom Steels, and it's not surprising it's laboured after all of the effort he's put in today.
That's rather a nice shot from the passing cameras, as the riders appear to be riding on thin air. They keep gazing around to see if they can work out where Taffy might be as they race along these cobblestones, the route taking them round to the right now into one of the final towns before we head up through Hem down to Roubaix.
And now in Confins-en-Pévèle, and this is the right-hand turn to the very difficult section of cobbles, the Pavé de l'Arbre. Now the first part of this cobblestones is known as the Pavé Bleu, or the blue cobblestones, and the reason is because they're made of a very dark blue granite, and when it's wet, these are the most treacherous section of cobbles, I think, in the whole of Paris-Roubaix, and there have been some pretty impressive crashes here in the past.
Well, just about, let me see, just about here I think it was, Paul, when Jonathan Boyer made a spectacular somersault off the course and into a ditch. He was there actually on that bend, that's right. And Jonathan, of course, one of the top American bike riders just before Greg LeMond took control of that situation.
Boyer, the first American ever to take part in the Tour de France. Yes. And then a certain rivalry built up between him and Greg LeMond, but Greg in fact went on to win the Tour on 3 occasions. And Jonathan Boyer still comes to visit the Tour de France most years now, and he really still does enjoy following the sport of cycling. But Taffy is riding exceptionally well here, Phil. He's digested those cobblestones pretty easily, and the crowd being very decent to him, standing further back, allowing him to use that little band of dirt, which is quite hard at the side of the road.
Either that or very knowledgeable, knowing that the riders will steal that road off them anyway and push them in the ditch if they get half a shot at it. You may have noticed a lot of bicycle tracks going through the mud there. Well, there's no riders in front, of course, except there is a 2-day mountain bike race now to Roubaix, finishing on the stadium. That'll already be over in Roubaix and has been won by a Mappé rider. Now, I wonder if that's an omen.
It may well be an omen. There are 2 Mappé riders in this group. George Hincap is still looking very good. He will feel fairly confident now that this group will stay together, and he would have a pretty good crack at second place, or at least a place on the podium, because I've never seen George ride this well in Paris-Roubaix today. The conditions have been perfect. The road is dry, the sky is blue, and I tell you what, it has been a very fast race. But Andrea Taffy is not weakening at all. He's flying here up the Pavé de l'Arbre, and in fact he's almost got time to stop for a coffee at the top.
Well, not quite that gap yet, but it's growing all the time thanks to the slowing down tactics. Oh, that was a wide one. Almost overshot the corner there, but he pulled it back into line. And Andrea Taffy, let's have another look at that. It went a little bit sharp left there, and he's just skidded across the crowd line. He's okay, and Taffy's lives, survives. Call it what you will, but he's still building on his lead over that chase group.
Despite the fact that he's got an advantage of over a minute, 1:15 was the last time check we had, he's still taking all the risks on these corners, and that's the one thing that always amazed me about Paris-Roubaix, Phil. The speed and risks that guys take on these corners. They're going round them as if they're normal tarmac corners at speeds of 40-45 kilometres an hour, although Andrea Taffy did nearly lose it there.
And it looks as though Vandenbroek again is losing it on a stretch of cobblestones. He's been in difficulty now on the last few stretches, as he tries to keep that breakaway in sight. He knows if he can just hold them once onto the smooth road, he'll get himself back into the action. And he's really fighting now to get himself a good finish at Roubaix.
He's fighting now, digging deep into his courage, but he doesn't have the kind of power that you need to ride this section of cobblestones, the Pavé de l'Arbre. It's a long false flat up to the main road there before they turn right and left and take in another section of cobbles. But he won't give up. This young man from just down the road from here, in fact he only lives 25 kilometres away from Roubaix, is giving everything to try and stay in contact. He knows if he doesn't lose too much on the cobblestone section that he can always recuperate, and he seems to be able to ride back once we get onto the flatter surface tarmac roads.
Well, he's going to fight all the way to Roubaix for obvious reasons then, but Leon Van Bon and George Hincapie, they have never faltered in this chase. They both look very strong. There's the Café de l'Arbre as the leader goes by. These people are going to watch this race go by, and then they'll be watching in the coffee shop there having themselves a beer and seeing the finish in Roubaix. Massive crowd here today.
Again, Taffy taking a wide berth around that corner. The speed is unbelievable. He doesn't want to slow down. He doesn't want to touch his brakes at all. Meanwhile, in the group of 5 behind, you can see they've left number 81, Frank van den Broek, still suffering, grappling, trying to hang on to the slipstream of that group, trying to stay in contact, dreaming of staying with the group, because if he can stay with the group, he could surprise 1 or 2 riders when it comes to the sprint on the track, because the sprint on the velodrome in Roubaix is always a very difficult one to judge.
He's coming back already, and we're not even at the end of the pavé, just about here, as Frankie gets himself back in contention with this breakaway. Most of the work being done by Leon van Bon, but again Tom Steels has got himself to the front, and Ludo Peters, and all they do is slow it down. So Andrea Taffy really is going to have to shake their hands when he gets to the finish. They've done a good job for everything they could possibly do, in fact.
Look at the wind coming across the Italian flag. Well, the reason is there's a very strong wind coming across from the right-hand side there, and Van den Broek has nowhere at all to get any shelter. You see how compact the group is in front of him. Tom Steels there, hugging onto the wheel of George Hincapie, who's setting the pace, and very sensibly on the far side, Wilfred Peters. Peters realising that he's just got to sit back and save as much energy as possible, because these guys now have got to think about the possibility of a sprint on the velodrome, because nobody's going to see Andrea Taffy again as they go past the Café de l'Arbre. And look at that, just at the end of the first part of the cobblestones, Van den Broek is almost back on the wheel.
And when he turns on that right corner, it'll be a headwind, so the leaders will probably sit up and he'll slip onto the back again. Well, if you make efforts like that, you deserve results. And this man has made the effort of the day so far. On the attack now since the forest itself, and never looking like losing his grip on it, even when he had that puncture and a fortuitous tyre change, well, back wheel change. And then not only did he get back to the leaders, but he carried up one of his strong men with him, Wilfred Peters. Incredible piece of riding.
This is a tough section of cobblestones. At the end of this section of cobblestones a couple of years ago, that in fact Bernard Hinault, when he was riding in the jersey of the world champion, took a right-hand turn and fell off because he hit a dog. And in fact he hit the ground and bounced back up so quickly he hardly even lost 10 seconds, and he went on to win Paris-Roubaix on that day. Now Andrea Taffy's back onto the tarmac section. He will get some relief now and be able to get back down to the obvious job of work of building up as big a lead as possible. He now has to make sure that he keeps full of energy, keeps plenty of food on board, and make sure that he doesn't have any kind of weakness towards the end of this race. And he's obviously dosed his effort very well. Patrick Lefevre coming up alongside here. The advantage a lot of the teams have nowadays as well, Phil, is they also, in these events, because they are covered live on television, have a TV set in the car as well, so it gives them a full scope of just exactly what is going on in the race. And a lot of times they know more about what's going on in the race than the actual referees do.
Well, it's that's the size of cycling these days now. It's a multi sport as far as money input is concerned. As we slip back to the cafe, and the crowd a little bit less cheering now as they see the group going through, which will contain Ballerini and co.
It's Frankie Andreu still in with the group on the back of Ballerini's wheel. In this group still Johan Museeuw, Schmiel, Van Petegem, the big names of Paris-Roubaix, but Frankie once again flying the flag for US Postal Service in with the big names of Paris-Roubaix. He's done a great job. He said he didn't feel too good this morning. He felt that the advantage would certainly go to his own teammate George Hincapie. Well, he was right on that, but his form is not too bad either.
Well, he's still in that very same position he was in when he attacked. He hasn't moved. His legs just keep going round, rather metronome-like, but the gap is now pushing out. He is actually building his lead up now to 1.5 minutes, so he is still going clear as Roubaix gets closer.
Frank van den Broek surviving over these last sections of cobblestones, dragging himself back onto that group of 5 riders, making a 6-man chase group, and still at the back of the group his former teammates Tom Steels and Wilfred Peters, allowing everybody else to do the work. There's a split now. Hincapie's gone away again, and immediately Tom Steels launches an attack to get across there.
Well, George, really, if he could just get somebody off the front and settle down to the chase, it is not impossible. But if it doesn't happen very soon, then Taffy will win this race for sure.
great reaction there by Tom Steels, and immediately coming across there, and that's discouraged Hincapie. Hincapie doesn't want to insist with that effort anymore, and again the whole group coming back together. 6 riders and in 6th position as he has been for the last few kilometres. Frank Vandenbroek recovering once more. The team manager coming alongside here, Bernard Kilfen, will be quite astounded, I think, to see his man in this leading group, because we've said on a couple of occasions, big discussions this year about the fact that Frank Vandenbroek was not supposed to ride this event. He's supposed to save himself and prepare for next week's Liège-Bastogne-Liège.
Well, he's ridden fantastic today, and he's still going to be in at the kill if he gets his way. I don't know what he's like on the track, mind you. His uncle, Jean-Luc, was excellent. I think he was a junior world pursuit champion in his formative years.
He was Jean-Luc was in fact a junior world pursuit champion, an excellent rider on the track, and then became an excellent time trialist, but completely different rider to Frank. Frank is much more of an aggressive rider. Jean-Luc had to win races on his own. He had to try and get off the front and win in a time trial method, exactly the same way as Andrea Taffy is doing now. But I have to say, Frank is definitely an aggressive rider. He goes for the brakes, and he has got the explosive acceleration to get away from the rest of everybody in a field.
Well, last year, Andrea Taffy's real big win was the national title when he won the Italian Championship, but he got second in Paris-Roubaix. He's now 6 miles from the finish here. He also has always been a World Cup rider, 4th in the San Sebastian race and 4th in the Grand Prix Suisse, all that happening last year. We saw him win in Rochester in Great Britain when the Rochester Classic was a World Cup counting event in 1997. And the same year then he finished second in the Amstel Gold Race, and he won Paris-Brussels. So he's also won the Tour of Lombardy, of course. That would have been in 1996. So he's no stranger, Paul, to winning the big event. But I wonder, he'd probably trade all of those in for this victory right now, because this is the classic.
As far as Andrea Taffy is concerned, this is the classic. This is the classic he's dreamed about. Even for an Italian to win the Tour of Lombardy, it was a great thing for him. It was a great performance. But he felt more at home on Roubaix, on the roads, on the cobblestones here. He's always wanted to win this race. This for him will be the most important victory of his career, as long as he can get there without any mishaps in the next 20 kilometres or so, because it is still possible to have some problems sneak up. Lady Luck is always in attendance when it comes to Paris-Roubaix, and it's on this penultimate section of cobblestones here as we go to the section at Hem that in fact Henny Kuiper nearly lost his Paris-Roubaix. He was on that section of cobblestones which zigzags across the fields, and he was flicking from one piece of tarmac to the other when he ripped his back tyre off, and the mechanic couldn't get the wheel out, and it was absolute panic for 30 or 40 seconds while the mechanic ran back to the car to get a spare machine, and Henny got up and got going again and managed to hold off the attack or the return of the riders behind. And it's still, the thing about Roubaix is the race doesn't finish until you get into the velodrome.
That's for sure. The sun on his back right now as he races towards the finish in the velodrome, where, by the way, there is an enormous crowd waiting for the arrival of whoever's going to win. It looks like this man now. They can see him on a huge screen, and so they know exactly where he is. They'll appreciate this sort of effort today as he now runs into the closing kilometres. We are just about 8 kilometres from the finish.
Taffy went round that corner again like all the previous corners he's taken at full bore. No thought of slowing down, no thought of trying to take it carefully. He wants to build up as much advantage as possible because he knows anything can happen over the next few kilometres. But still, as you said, Phil, the position has never changed. He's in that kind of low-profile time trialling position, which in fact the UCI, the international governing body, has tried to get rid of by banning the Spinacci bars, the clip-on handlebars that many of these riders adopted for attacks like this. And many riders still getting down into that position because they feel that it is aerodynamic and they can exploit a lot of their power.
Well, there's from the helicopter, which isn't flying very high, is it? Just a good lens on the camera, I guess. But there are the leaders trying to chase down the leader of the day. And, well, Taffy is looking pretty cool and smooth out there now. And look at the two Mappé boys having a chat. Tom Steele speaking with Peters. To me, Peters is the obvious candidate to try and break clear here. But at the moment, it's George Hincapie who's gone again.
Hincapie riding a fantastic race. Immediately, though, the cover came from Tom Steels. As soon as he saw that attack, Steels has still got the explosive energy to get across to these attacks. And if this group stays together, he has to be looking at second place because he is the top sprinter at the moment. He won Ghent-Wevelgem a couple of days ago thanks to Wilfred Peters and Johan Museo. And if he can just hold on to the velodrome, he'd be looking at a podium place.
Such a complete team. Now, this man's latest time check, 2 minutes and 2 seconds is the gap now. And so that should do it as he continues to gain time over that chase group.
Well, that's unbelievable. It was so difficult for him. He's attacked so many times today. He's attacked over every section of cobblestones, and when the final attack came after his comeback from that puncture, he was very difficultly opening up that advantage. It started off at 50 metres, it went to 75, and it seemed to hover at 100 metres for an awful long time. He pulled back this man who was flying away at 60 kilometres an hour.
Picking his way over a few cobblestones and onto the rickety-rackety sidewalk there, which is all tarmac anyway, as he still continues to push round those heavy gears and keep the pressure on those pedals. I would just love to be inside his mind like now just to hear what he's thinking about as he comes towards Roubaix.
Just wants to tap out the rhythm. He can feel the pain in his legs, but today the pain is much more acceptable because he's in the lead in Paris-Roubaix, the race that he's been dreaming about since he was a kid, since he saw Francesco Moser ride onto the velodrome wearing the tricolor jersey as champion of Italy, and he is just dreaming about doing exactly the same thing today. Tom Steels is doing a great job in the group behind, just sitting there waiting, leaving these other guys to set the pace, do their turn at the front, keep the pressure on, but all the time, Phil, despite the fact there are 5 men working here, they're losing time.
They're losing time because of the brilliant blocking tactics being done there by the two Mapei riders, who go through and then slow it right down when they feel it's going to go somewhere. Second to last sector of Pavé now. We've just seen Taffy complete it, and now we're seeing the chasers go on. 2 minutes is the time gap now, and still behind, remember, the big names who never really got to the front of this race all day. For once, the first breakaway didn't actually shape the race, but it very nearly has done, because Tom Steels is still here from that group.
Great performance to be able to do that. Let's not forget, at the end of the day, Tom Steels will have been in the action of this race for 230 of the 260 kilometres, and still he's got the courage and the determination to keep covering these attacks. That last attack by George Hincapie immediately was covered by Tom Steels. Steels realising that the big danger man, if it does come down to the sprint, is going to be Hincapie, because Hincapie has won stages in the sprint before. He has the ability, I think, to develop into a top-class sprinter, just like Mario Cipollini. He's got the same build as Cipollini and a similar turn of speed.
And that little group down there has slowed down rather dramatically at the moment. And Frank Vandenbroek, who's yo-yoed on and off the back, is on at the moment, hanging onto the back wheel there of Wilfred Peters.
An incredible rider, Vandenbroek, to be able to recover and bounce back from the Tour of Flanders last week, where he finished second in a very close sprint with Peter van Petegem, and now, after a bit of rest and recuperation this week, be taking part here in Paris-Roubaix. He's won almost 45 races in his career so far, which is quite remarkable when you think he's still only 24 years of age.
But this man a little bit older than that right now, having ridden as a pro for 11 years. Started off with a win in the Tour of Luxembourg back in 1989. We first saw him racing in Florida in the old Tour of the Americas. And I thought he was just an Italian domestique, and he won 2 stages back-to-back down there in Fort Lauderdale and Miami. And well, that was the first time we'd heard of him, and of course the rest, as they say, is history. He's now heading for his first ever victory in the biggest race in the world.
Well, he started his career off as a domestique, but he's worked for some of the greatest champions of recent years. He's worked for Franco Ballerini, but I think more importantly, he's worked and raced alongside Johan Museeuw for many years, and he will have picked up a lot of tips, and he probably picked up the motivation for Paris-Roubaix from Johan Museeuw, who is, as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Classics of the late 80s and 90s, a title he took over from Sean Kelly, who was the king of the 80s, and that's why he's come up through the ranks slowly. He's always progressed from the first year he turned professional until right now, and he's now able to pick and choose which classics he wants to aim for, but this is the one that he's really aimed for over the last few years.
Tom Steels does just enough to make a mess of everything there, then he swings off the front at 5 kilometres from the finish, at 3 miles to go for Andrea Taffy, about 8 or 9 minutes of racing, and that will see him over on the finishing line.
Just one last drag as we go here through the town of Hem. He will take a right turn, then a swift left, and there's a long straight drag up to the summit there before you can turn off to go towards the motorway, and that, after 260 kilometres of racing, is very difficult for the legs. It's a good launch pad for an attack, but that's something Andrea Taffy doesn't have to worry about. The blue car there, in fact, is the public relations car from the Society Tour de France, and the man driving that car today is Bernard Hinault, and he will appreciate the performance that Andrea Tafi is putting in here in Paris-Roubaix today.
Well, I know that Tafi started this race with a totally free hand from his team manager, Patrick Lefevre. He was told, hey Paul, this is a breakaway from the next group because this is Johan Museeuw and with André Schmil now.
Well, that's amazing. For a moment there I thought it was Wilfred Peters had attacked with Joe Plancart, but in fact what has happened is Johan Museeuw and André Schmil have come out of the Ballerini group, and they are chasing alone now to try and bridge the gap. They're not going to catch the George Hincapie group, but they will be racing for a good place on the velodrome in Roubaix. Johan Museeuw, 12 months to the day after he was thrown to the ground in this race, is still riding like the true champion that he always was.
Two former winners of Paris-Roubaix now being put in the place today by the man who's about to get it for the first time. He's 33 years of age too, Andrea Tafi. He comes from Florence, most beautiful part of Italy of course, and these two now I think a show of bravado rather than any progress for them, because they're in no man's land as this race comes towards its close, and this rider is heading into the last 2 miles of the race.
Tafi now on the long drag up outside the town of Hem. Once he goes over the summit of this, it's a downhill, straight road to the finish line, and he will then start to rejoice and I should think salute the crowd. He's still got that same expression on his face, still the same position on his handlebars, holding the top of the bars, but the legs now will be starting to ache, but he'll realise that there's no problem now. He can just cruise to the finish of the line in Roubaix because it's over for everybody else. The winner is definitely going to be the champion of Italy, Andrea Tafi, and what a performance, Phil. He came back from that unfortunate incident where he had the flat tyre. He got a change, he fought his way back into the group with his teammate Wilfred Peters, and then once he made the junction with the front group again, he put in a searing attack while everybody else was looking the wrong way, going for bottles.
Few will say he wasn't the best rider today, and if you look at the faces of the crowd here, full of smiles and applause as they welcome the man who blazes the trail from the beautiful city of Compiègne, where the race has started, by the way, there for the past 31 years. It was first started there in 1968, and they're now rushing in towards the finish at Roubaix, where this classic has always finished. Not always on the stadium, but the vast majority of the finishes have been on the stadium.
Tafi now getting over the summit of this climb in Hem. What a fantastic position there, really stretched out on his machine. Hincapie's attacked in the group behind.
He's lower down the climb, but quite a considerable way further back. Hincapie had a little dig there, but they've jumped on him straight away, so he's sat up.
The man who jumped on him straight away was Wilfred Peters as well. Still they're controlling the race. Hincapie's going again. He reckons now's the chance to try and open it up. He looks over his shoulder. Don't look back, George, just keep going.
Well, George is really trying to do something here. He's so desperate for a big result, and it's been a fabulous race for him today. So the American now has really proudly worn that American National Championships jersey today, as has Tom Steels and of course Andrea Tafi, each their respective country's champion. George has sat up now and looked straight in the face of Tom Steels. Back to the Italian flag on his back here of Andrea Tafi, still talking to Patrick Lefevre, and Lefevre is just going to say, it's all good news, Andrea, they're not going to catch you now. This is your race this time. We're not going to ask you to be second or third as part of the Mapei setup. It's yours to win and take for yourself. And still George Hincapie further back has launched yet another attack, chased down immediately by Tom Steels, and Joe Plancart just following George's wheel there. I don't think there's much left in Joe's legs either right now. This rider though, all the pain of the day will be washed away by a tremendous performance, as very shortly he will flick left into the central part of the road and take this race over the last small stretch of cobblestones and then onto the stadium at Roubaix. This is a wonderful feeling now for Andrea Tafi. A third and a second. It is now going to be a first as well, so he'll get the cobblestone to take home. As he moves on to the central reservation, let's join Paul Sherwin to talk him into the finish.
Well, Phil, you can certainly hear the crowd now rising to the occasion, because Andrea Tafi is about to ride into this stadium and become the winner of the 97th Paris-Roubaix. The crowd are on their feet because they realise this man has had a love affair with Paris-Roubaix. He has dreamed about winning this race. He's been third, he's been second, he's always been present. But I spoke to him this morning. He said to me, it is a childhood dream, wearing the jersey of the champion of Italy, to ride into this stadium, just like my idol Francesco Moser did so many years ago. And in a few seconds' time, he's going to come around this corner, and he will be the man who will win the 97th Paris-Roubaix. And what a win that's going to be.
And absolutely right, Paul, and this cheer reserved for the champion of the day. It has to be the greatest arrival in world cycling, because the crowd are just shouting his name and chanting his name, Taffy, Taffy, as he goes around the stadium. And he has all of the time in the world to enjoy what will be, without doubt, his finest hour. 1 lap to go, and they won't be in the stadium before he comes round again, because they're still on that stretch of cobblestones outside the stadium. Andrea Taffy can wave to the crowd, he can seek out his wife Gloria and his son Tommaso, because now he is going to win Paris-Roubaix. The memory when he was told he had to be third in 1996, and he got second last time, and now he is in the #1 position. The sun high in the sky now after 6 hours and 40 odd minutes of cycling, but this man has been at the front for most of those hours too, and he's never looked really like he wasn't the man to beat. The two-handed salute for Andrea Taffy. He is going to enjoy every moment of this, winning as champion of Italy, as Francesco Moser did his hero in 1980. And looking outside the stadium now, this is Wilfred Peters, so he must have slipped away in the last kilometre or so, and they can't be far behind him because he's continually looking over his shoulder. But Wilfred Peters is now setting up here a possible 1-2-3. Third last year's, Peters is in for a second place finish here. If that happens, can Tom Steels take the third place? Because that would be absolutely amazing. It was Museu and Bortolami and Taffy back in 1996, and now this time around it could be the same again. The bell is ringing. 1 lap to go for Wilfred Peters, but the rest are not very far behind him. He keeps looking across the track at them. They're in the stadium, and there's also a little group of lap riders too. You'll probably catch those in a second if you do ignore them, because Wilfred Peters is riding on this track in second place right now. Taffy is watching this too from the centre. This is the group, in fact, who are coming on now. There are 1.5 laps to go for them. It's only half a lap to go for Wilfred Peters. So Peters will allow them to go through. Make sure, like all good professionals, they're not coming back at you. And so Mappe now have first and second. Can they make it 3 with Tom Steels? Steels, remember, has been away in this race for something like 230 kilometres. Surely that must have blunted his speed, and Hincapie's going to try and make it third for him. If he does, it'll be the best ever finish by an American rider, and there looks to be a lot of speed in those legs for George, but Hincapie is being outrun here by the man on the left of our picture. Tom Steels has done it. A 1-2-3 for Mappe again, and George Hincapie will have to do with fourth, but that in itself a superb ride by him, and it equals the performance of Greg LeMond. And behind is Joe Plankett and Leon Van Bont, but in the end, just look at the speed there in the legs of this man. Well, a 1-2-3 for Mappe. I don't know where Tom Steels found the strength to do a ride like that. This man is the winner of the day, and the man who's got the best result for the United States for some years is now in the track centre, and he's talking now with Paul Sherwin. He should be pretty happy.
George, this has been the best Paris-Roubaix you've put in over the years. You've been looking fantastic since the Tour of Flanders, fourth in Gent-Wevelgem. You must be pretty pleased with the way you rode over the cobbles.
Yeah, definitely. Had a great day, and you know, everybody was really looking at me today because I did well in Gent-Wevelgem and I rode a strong race in Flanders. But like I said, today was a one-day race and anything can happen, and I'm just glad I didn't have any punctures and I had good legs.
Is it a little bit special to ride a race like Paris-Roubaix wearing the jersey of national champion of the United States?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've told you before that it means everything to me to wear this jersey over in Europe. And, you know, of course I'm going to try to get it again in June, but again, that's a one-day race also, but hopefully I'll have luck on my side there as well.
It was difficult to do anything really against the Mappe squad because once again their strength was in numbers towards the end.
Yeah, definitely. Those guys are amazing. You know, they're every race they're so strong, and it's good to have the utmost respect for them. And you know, they had players in the back too with Museu and a couple other guys. Anybody could have really done a good job there.
And these are the showers that the riders look forward to for the last hour of racing, I would imagine. Inside there is Paul Schumann again. This time he's managed to seek out the champion of Belgium, Tom Steels.
Tom, it's a difficult race, Paris-Roubaix anyway, but today you were in the breakaway for 100 kilometers, and then still in the end you were third.
Yeah, you have some of those days when you can't do anything, but yeah, I'm really glad. This is my first World Cup race this year, and I'm third. So now I know. I think that Paris-Roubaix is one of the races I can win. So for the future, it gives a lot of confidence.
Were you worried to be in the breakaway for such a long time and then have a group of riders come up behind you? Did you still think you could stay to the finish?
No, I thought it would be difficult. But I said to myself, when they come back to the, and there is a group coming back, don't stay in the front and try to go again in the breakaway. And yeah, it worked out like that. So I'm glad.
And what about the performance of your teammate Andrea Taffi? He dreamed about winning Paris-Roubaix with the Italian champions jersey, and he was so strong today.
Yeah, he was very strong today. When he went away, he was riding really hard, and all the other riders tried to catch him, but after 10-15 kilometers, he just gave it up. So I think he was the strongest man in the race.
And once again, Mappé 1, 2, 3.
That's unbelievable. That's like a dream. So yeah, I think this is really unbelievable.
Well done.
Okay.
Well, Frankie, you didn't want to talk to me before the start, but it turned out actually working out pretty well for you.
For the team, yeah, it worked out good. I mean, team rode good. Got Georgian. I took him that last part to keep him in position for the forest, and came out with that small group in front. And then once that group was there, the guys in the back like Schmiel and Misei and Zanini, and I was managed to stay in that group. They were just kind of watching each other, and it really seemed like they were just racing against Ballerini. Ballerini would attack, and these guys would go with them, and then they'd all sit up. They weren't going to let him do anything today.
Are you satisfied with the performance by George, because he came onto the stadium in a great position, finishing fourth at the end of the day? The best performance ever by an American in Paris-Roubaix.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, he's riding super strong. He probably could have made podium, but it's the way the sprint goes, and he's attacked a bunch at the end of the race. And you got to race the race to win it. You don't race the race to get third or to save yourself for the sprint. And so he rode a super race.
Well, you played an important part in his positioning going into the Forest of Arenberg. It seems as if you two guys have a special relationship in this race.
I don't know. It suits our abilities. So yeah, I mean, I just keep him in the front, and then I was in that back group, so I was able to watch everything like there. And when the big guns would go, I'd just sit on, and I didn't have to do much work. And so that would screw up the back group too, just for him to keep his gap.
What's the general feeling in there of the performance of Andrea Taffi today?
I haven't heard anybody say anything, but I'm impressed. That guy comes through every time. He's amazing.
Well, then, thanks a lot.
Italian stallion.
Well, Joe, that was a legendary Paris-Roubaix, and you were up there at the front, and now you really know what this is race about, because you're becoming very consistent here.
Yeah, it was a hard race, and I was not bad today. I was good. And after Wallers, I was always in the front. More the strongest man in the race, he win. Taffi. It's not possible to get Taffi to the group.
I was watching the race on television. I saw so many times Andrea Taffi attacking, and I thought maybe he was doing too much, but he was super strong.
He was super strong. It's unbelievable. He had he was in my group, and he had problems with his bike. And I think by myself, you don't see him again. Or after 10 kilometers, he come back, and he was direct attack. And me and Frank van den Broek and Hincapie and Van Bon, we riding full speed, but it's not possible to take him back.
One day, would you like to come back and win this race, because you've already finished second and you always seem to ride well in Paris-Roubaix?
Yeah, it's for me the best race, I think so. The Ronde van Vlaanderen is also good, but Paris-Roubaix is much better for me, I think so. And maybe I can next year win the race. I have now conference. I think by myself I can win this race.
Good, thank you.
Yep.
Well, on this occasion, Joe has had to give best here to this man here, Andrea Taffi, getting the victory. What a wonderful, sweet victory it is for him as champion of Italy. And now he can settle down and help other riders in his Mapei team perhaps win the classics still to come, because this is a formidable outfit, and he's going to return from Roubaix in France a very happy man indeed. He dreamt of this. Apparently his team manager said that he will be totally protected today. It was his race to win if he had the legs, and my goodness me, did he have the legs. There's the final result on the rundown. Johan Museo in there again in 9th. And if I could just remind you, why don't you visit us on our website, and you'll find some interesting facts there. The address is www.worldcycling.com. This has been a Classic Roubaix. We hope you've enjoyed it. We certainly have, bringing it to you. Goodbye.